Clerk, do we have quorum? Sergeant at Arms, please ring the bell for 5 minutes.
Well, the Speaker of the Senate, Honorable Amason Kingi, has directed that the quorum bell be rung for members who are yet to get to the chambers to be able to walk into the chambers and allow the House commence its business. 15 members are required in the chambers for the House to achieve its requisite quorum for the commencement of the House business. 4 bills are this afternoon lined up for second reading. The Natural Resources Benefit Sharing Bill, originating from the Senate Bill number 6 of 2022 by Tana River Senator Honorable Danson Mungatana, is one of those bills lined up for second reading. And of course, the debate on this bill already kicked off, and this afternoon debate will be resuming, and the House will be going into division on this bill. This bill seeks to provide a legislative framework for the establishment and enforcement of a system of benefit sharing in natural resource exploitation between natural resource exploiters, the national government, county governments, and local communities, and to that end provides that the Commission for Revenue Allocation oversees the same. This bill, once enacted, would confer on the Cabinet Secretary responsible for matters relating to natural resources and the power to make regulations for the purpose of bringing into effect the provisions contained in the bill. The bill therefore delegates limited and conditional legislative powers, and the bill does not limit fundamental rights and freedoms. Debate on this bill already kicked off, and this afternoon will be a resumption of that debate on this motion that was interrupted on Thursday, the 9th of March, the year 2023. The House will be going into division on whether to approve the contents of this bill or reject. The County Vocational Education and Training Bill, originating from the Senate, a bill by Honorable Senator Moses Kajwang, is also lined up for second reading. And the object of this bill is to put in place a legal framework to govern the establishment and management of vocational education and training with the county. The bill also provides for preliminary matters and sets out various definitions, the guiding principle in relation to implementation of vocational education and training, as well as obligations of the national government, county governments, and owners of institutions registered under the Act. This part also provides provision for trainees with special needs and confers an obligation on the county governments to ensure that measures are put in place, including facilities and institutions to cater for the needs of trainees with special needs. This bill is lined up for second reading on the floor of the Senate chambers this afternoon. The Agricultural and Livestock Extension Services Bill, originating from the Senate. This is a bill by the Honorable Member, Senator Maureen Tabitha Mutinda, is lined up for second reading. And the object of this bill is to provide for the policy and institutional framework within which the agricultural and livestock industry operates by, among others, establishing the Agricultural and Livestock Extension Service, which will be managed by the board of directors. Agriculture is the backbone of the economy. Well, as you can see, members are walking in. The bell is still on, of course, to allow the members to be able to get into the chambers. And I believe the quorum will be achieved in just a few minutes once the Sergeant at Arms and the Speaker directs that the quorum has been achieved. Then the House will commence its business for this afternoon sitting. So the bill by Honorable Senator Maureen Tabitha Mutinda on the Agricultural and Livestock Extension Service Bill, Senate Bill number 12 of 2022, is lined up for second reading on the floor of the Senate this afternoon. There is also the Mang Beans Bill, originating from the Senate, Senate Bill number 13 of 2022. This is a bill by Honorable Senator Enoch Wambua, also lined up for second reading this afternoon. And the principal object of the bill is to provide for the development, regulation, and promotion of the mung bean sector in Kenya. It provides for the support of farmers of mung beans in each county in the production and marketing of their produce. The bill also provides for the regulation of the production and sale of mung bean products by county governments and the Agriculture and Food Authority. It also encourages the use of mung beans as a food security item by the national. Well, let me hand you over for this live broadcast.
First order, clerk.
Order number 1, administration of oath. Order number 2, communication from the chair.
Honorable Senators, I would like to acknowledge the presence in the Speaker's Gallery this afternoon, a visiting delegation of students leaders from various universities in Kisii County. The delegation is in the Senate for a one-day academic exposition. Honorable Senators, in our usual tradition of receiving and welcoming visitors to Parliament, I extend a warm welcome to them, and on behalf of the Senate and on my own behalf, wish them a fruitful visit. I will allow the majority leader to say short welcoming remarks to the visiting students.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I want to join you and on behalf of the Senate to welcome the visiting delegation from Kisii University. Mr. Speaker, I know a bit of history about this particular university and how they eventually became a fully chartered institution, the journey they've had to walk as an institution. And I'm proud to say, Mr. Speaker, that I know that currently they are, despite being young and not in the league of the older institutions of higher learning in the country, they are among those that are doing extremely well in terms of student population and the courses that they offer, and even overall as an institution, Mr. Speaker. If we were to do a ranking of our public institutions, especially the newly created ones, institutions that are maybe 20 years and below, you would find Kisii University to rank among the very best. So we celebrate these students that have come to the Senate on a visit. I see their senator is just walking in. I had taken over your duties because you're my neighbor. And Kisii and Kericho are like two conjoined twins, Mr. Speaker. You cannot separate them. We share so much in common. And therefore, I feel privileged to have had the opportunity. I hope they learn to the full extent of their study, Mr. Speaker, the things that they came to find out about. They take some time to get to learn about institution. This house has no less than 10 former student leaders of various universities, including yours truly, that are in this house, Mr. Speaker. Therefore, I believe even as these leaders and students are getting to learn their ways about their country and learning about leadership, Mr. Speaker, they will grow to become better. And I believe amongst them in the future, in the days when senior Senator Oburu and myself will have moved on to do other things, they will replace us in this house and do even greater things for this country, Mr. Speaker. So thank you, Mr. Speaker, and welcome to the team from Kisii University. Thank you.
Honorable Senators, I do have a further communication. Honorable Senators, yesterday afternoon, the Senate Minority Leader rose on a point of order, seeking that the Speaker makes a communication on changes in the leadership of the minority side on the grounds that the Political Parties Tribunal had made a ruling yesterday, 14th of March 2023, striking out the complaint that had been lodged with it by the Senate Minority Whip on the grounds that it had no jurisdiction in the matter. The Minority Leader did not provide any evidence of such order having been made, but instead alleged that the matter was in the public domain. To this point of order, I ruled that in the same manner that I had previously withheld my communication in response to the correspondence that the Senate Minority Leader had furnished me with after receipt of an order of the tribunal served on my office, I could similarly only pronounce myself on the matter after receiving an order to the contrary. I further ruled, which is trite law, and which is in keeping with the precedents of this House, that the Chair is not to rely on rumors, hearsay, or newspaper or other media accounts. Subsequently, Senator Okongo Mogeni, Senior Counsel, tabled a document asserting that it was a ruling of the tribunal in the matter. After a series of other interventions and points of order canvassed by senators from both sides, Senator Munyihaji Faki also tabled a document which he purported to be the order of the tribunal in the matter. Honorable Senators will appreciate that the Chair may not always be able to verify or authenticate documents laid on the table instantly, and there will be many occasions when it will be necessary that documents of significance be scrutinized and a determination be made thereafter. I therefore informed the House that I was retreating to my chambers to scrutinize the documents laid on the table and to consider the interventions canvassed. Honorable Senators, upon arriving at my chambers, I received from the legal office of the Senate a certified copy of the ruling and the orders of the tribunal in PPDT complaint number E003 of 2023, Fatuma Dulo and Jubilee Party as first and second complainants versus Azimio la Umoja One Kenya Coalition Party as the respondent, and Stewart Mazayo, Ledama Olekina, and the Speaker of the Senate of the Republic of Kenya as the first, second, and third interested parties, respectively. It is noteworthy that the ruling and the order were received by the Senate legal team on behalf of the Speaker as the third interested party. Honorable Senators, I have perused the documents tabled by Senator Okongo Mogeni, purporting to be the ruling of the tribunal, and the document laid on the table by Senator Munyihaji Faki, purporting to be the ruling of the tribunal against the documents of like destination obtained by a legal office, and I'm satisfied as to their authenticity. Honorable Senator, just walk in, please. The ruling of the tribunal at paragraph 15 reads as follows. Having found that the tribunal lacks jurisdiction, it follows that delving into the question of the second complaint's representation will be an exercise in futility. That leaves us with no option but to down our tools. In the disposition of paragraph 52, the ruling is to the following effect. In light of the foregoing, we order as follows: that the complaint and the application herein be and is hereby struck out, and to each party to bear its own course. The ruling is dated and delivered at Nairobi on 14th March 2023. The order, on the other hand, which is in the same terms as the ruling, is issued, dated and signed at Nairobi on 15th March 2023 and is under the hand and seal of the tribunal. Honorable Senators, you will recall that on 21st February 2021, it was indicated from this chair that while we were ready to deliver the ruling on the correspondence from the Senate Minority Leader on the changes made in the minority leadership, the ruling could not be delivered and had to be stayed because of an injunctive orders of the tribunal, and that ruling from the chair would issue as soon as the matter at the tribunal was concluded or the orders vacated. Honorable Senators, kindly walk in. I will repeat that last paragraph so that we maintain the flow. Honorable Senators, you will recall that on 21st February 2021, it was indicated from this chair that while we were ready to deliver the ruling on the correspondence from the Senate Minority Leader on the changes made in the minority leadership, the ruling could not be delivered and had to be stayed because of the injunctive orders of the tribunal, and that the ruling from this chair would issue as soon as the matter at the tribunal was concluded on the orders or the orders are vacated. On this particular issue, I remember quite a number of points of order were raised on whether this Senate or the Speaker should be injected through an order that emanated from the tribunal. Now, I want to say this for the record, members. Article 159(1) of our Constitution is very clear. It provides that the judicial authority is derived from the people and vests in and exercised by the courts and tribunals. So when our tribunals sit, they are actually exercising judicial authority derived from the people. And the question, therefore, is, if such a tribunal sits and issues an order, do we ignore it, and yet they derive their authority direct from the people of Kenya? The answer is we have to abide by that, because by ignoring those orders, then as a chair, I will be disobeying the authority or the judicial authority of the people of Kenya. Honorable Senators, the matter now having been determined in the manner that I've recited above, I will proceed to deliver my ruling. This is my ruling on the changes made on the minority side. Honorable Senators, as you may recall, at the sitting of the Senate held on Wednesday, 15th February 2023, the Senate Minority Leader rose on a point of order, seeking the directions of the Chair regarding a proposed change in the leadership of the minority party. The Senate Minority Leader asserted that he had communicated changes in the leadership of the minority side, the previous day and was concerned that the changes had not been effected and communicated to the Senate. The Senate Minority Leader more or less demanded that the changes be communicated at the sitting, alleging that failure to do so portrayed badly on the part of the speakership. Arguments in similar vein were advanced by Senators Ledama Olekina and Geoffrey Osotsi, who also sought the immediate communication by the Speaker on the matter. On the other hand, the Senate Majority Leader and the Deputy Speaker, speaking to the point of order raised by the same Minority Leader, urged caution, asserting that while it was a prerogative of the Senate Minority Leader to communicate changes in the leadership of minority side, pursuant to Standing Order 23 of the Senate Standing Orders, it was necessary that the Speaker be accorded time and opportunity to consider the contents of the communication received and to make a reasoned determination on the matter. Senator Abdul Haji, who also spoke on the matter, drew the attention of the Senate to the fact that the Jubilee Party, which is a member of the Azimio 1 coalition, had written a letter to the Speaker regarding the matter on the proposed changes to the leadership of the minority side and sought a ruling by the Speaker on the matter, having also considered the correspondence from the Jubilee Party. Honorable Senators, by way of background, their letter referenced Senator SEN SML 1-2023 dated 14th February 2023 and received in my office on the same day. The Senate Minority Leader communicated to the office of the Speaker the decision of a meeting of the Azimio la Umoja One Kenya Coalition Parliamentary Group meeting to make certain changes in the leadership of the minority side. The letter states as follows, and I quote, reference, discharge of a senator from leadership office. Pursuant to Standing Order 23-6, I hereby convey the decision of the minority party to discharge Senator Fatuma Dulo, CBS MP, from the position of the Senate Minority Whip. The decision was arrived at a meeting of the minority party held pursuant to Standing Order 23-4 in the place of the senator in the place of the senator herewith, please find minutes of the meeting at which the decision, the judicial authority, interventions canvassed. Honorable Senators, upon arriving at my chambers, I received from the legal office of the Senate a certificate certified copy of the ruling and the orders of the tribunal in PPDT complaint number E003 of 2023, Fatuma Dulo and Jubilee Party as first and second complainants versus Azimio la Umoja One Kenya Coalition Party as the respondent, and Stewart Mazayo, Ledama Olekina, and the Speaker of the Senate of the Republic of Kenya as the first, second, and third interested parties, respectively. It is noteworthy that the ruling and the order were received by the Senate legal team on behalf of the Speaker as the third interested party. Honorable Senators, I have perused the documents tabled by Senator Okongo Mogeni, purporting to be the ruling of the tribunal, and the document laid on the table by Senator Munyehaji Faki, purporting to be the ruling of the tribunal, against the documents of like destination obtained by a legal office, and I'm satisfied as to their authenticity. Honorable Senator, just walk in, please. The ruling of the tribunal at paragraph 15 reads as follows. Having found that the tribunal lacks jurisdiction, it follows that delving into the question of the second complaint's representation will be an exercise in futility. That leaves us with no option but to down our tools. In the disposition of paragraph 52, the ruling is to the following effect. In light of the foregoing, we order as follows: that the complaint and the application herein be and is hereby struck out, and to each party to bear its own course. The ruling is dated and delivered at Nairobi on 14th March 2023. The order, on the other hand, which is in the same terms as the ruling, is issued, dated and signed at Nairobi on 15th March 2023 and is under the hand and seal of the tribunal. Honorable Senators, you will recall that on 21st February 2021, it was indicated from this chair that while we were ready to deliver the ruling on the correspondence from the Senate Minority Leader on the changes made in the minority leadership, the ruling could not be delivered and had to be stayed because of an injunctive orders of the tribunal, and that ruling from the chair will issue as soon as the matter at the tribunal was concluded or the orders vacated. Honorable Senators, kindly walk in. I will repeat that last paragraph so that we maintain the flow. Honorable Senators, you will recall that on 21st February 2021, it was indicated from this chair that while we were ready to deliver the ruling on the correspondence from the Senate Minority Leader on the changes made in the minority leadership, the ruling could not be delivered and had to be stayed because of the injunctive orders of the tribunal, and that the ruling from this chair would issue as soon as the matter at the tribunal was concluded on the orders or the orders are vacated. On this particular issue, I remember quite a number of points of order were raised on whether this Senate or the Speaker should be injected through an order that emanated from the tribunal. Now, I want to say this for the record, members. Article 159(1) of our Constitution is very clear. It provides that the judicial authority is derived from the people and vests in and exercised by the courts and tribunals. So when our tribunals sit, they are actually exercising judicial authority derived from the people. And the question, therefore, is, if such a tribunal sits and issues an order, do we ignore it, and yet they derive their authority direct from the people of Kenya? The answer is we have to abide by that, because by ignoring those orders, then as a chair, I will be disobeying the authority or the judicial authority of the people of Kenya. Honorable Senators, the matter now Having been determined in the manner that I have recited above, I will proceed to deliver my ruling. This is my ruling on the changes made on the minority side. Honorable Senators, as you may recall, at the sitting of the Senate held on Wednesday, 15th February 2023, the Senate Minority Leader rose on a point of order, seeking the directions of the Chair regarding a proposed change in the leadership of the minority party. The Senate Minority Leader asserted that he had communicated changes in the leadership of the minority side the previous day and was concerned that the changes had not been effected and communicated to the Senate. The Senate Minority Leader more or less demanded that the changes be communicated at the sitting, alleging that failure to do so portrayed badly on the part of the speakership. Arguments in similar vein were advanced by Senators Ledama Olekina and Geoffrey Osotsi, who also sought the immediate communication by the Speaker on the matter. On the other hand, the Senate Majority Leader and the Deputy Speaker, speaking to the point of order raised by the same Minority Leader, urged caution, asserting that while it was a prerogative of the Senate Minority Leader to communicate changes in the leadership of minority side, pursuant to Standing Order 23 of the Senate Standing Orders, it was necessary that the Speaker be accorded time and opportunity to consider the contents of the communication received and to make a reasoned determination on the matter. Senator Abdul Haji, who also spoke on the matter, drew the attention of the Senate to the fact that the Jubilee Party, which is a member of the Azimio 1 coalition, had written a letter to the Speaker regarding the matter on the proposed changes to the leadership of the minority side and sought a ruling by the Speaker on the matter, having also considered the correspondence from the Jubilee Party. Honorable Senators, by way of background, their letter referenced Senator SEN SML 1-2023 dated 14th February 2023 and received in my office on the same day. The Senate Minority Leader communicated to the office of the Speaker the decision of a meeting of the Azimio la Umoja One Kenya Coalition Parliamentary Group meeting to make certain changes in the leadership of the minority side. The letter states as follows, and I quote, reference, discharge of a senator from leadership office. Pursuant to Standing Order 23-6, I hereby convey the decision of the minority party to discharge Senator Fatuma Dulo, CBS MP, from the position of the Senate Minority Whip. The decision was arrived at a meeting of the minority party held pursuant to Standing Order 23-4. In the place of the senator of Narok, Senator Ledama Olekina MP was elected as the new Senate Minority Whip. Further, Senator Edwin Sifuna MP was elected to the position of Deputy Senate Minority Whip. Attached herewith, please find minutes of the meeting at which the decision was made. Honorable Senators, attached to the letter were minutes of a meeting of the Azimio la Umoja One Kenya Coalition Parliamentary Group, indicating that the meeting was held on Tuesday, 14th February 2023 in the office of the Senate Minority Leader at Parliament Buildings, Nairobi at 12 noon. The minutes contain the resolution of the meeting making changes in the office of the Senate Minority Whip as follows. 1. That Senator Fatuma Dulo MP be removed from the position of Senate Minority Whip. And 2. That Senator Ledama Olekina MP be elected to the position of Senate Minority Whip. And 3. That Senator Edwin Watenya Sifuna MP be elected to the position of Deputy Senate Minority Whip. Further, attached to the minute was a list and signature of 16 senators who were present and in support of the resolution. Honorable Senators, subsequent to my receipt of the letter by the Minority Leader as aforesaid, I received 2 other letters dated 14th February 2023 and 15th February 2023 respectively from Senator Abdul Haji and Senator Fatuma Dulo. The letter by Senator Haji reference number MW/ADM/2023 into brackets 23, dated 14th February 2023, and received in my office on 15th February 2023, is titled Attempts to Challenge Jubilee Membership in Azimio. In the latter, Senator Haji sought to challenge the proposed changes in the leadership of minority side on the following grounds. One, the Jubilee Party has not formally exercised its right to exit the Azimio coalition in accordance with Article 22 of the Azimio Coalition Agreement. Two, the Jubilee Party has utmost confidence in the leadership of Senator Fatuma Dulo, CBS MP, at the Senate Minority Whip. And three, the Jubilee Party objected against the draconian and procedural and unfair attempt to remove the Jubilee member from the Whip position by only two constituent parties of Azimio coalition. Four, the Jubilee Party was unaware of the alleged Azimio PG to remove Senator Fatuma Dulo MP as the Senate Minority Whip, and consequently, as Jubilee never participated in the process, and the same was therefore not duly constituted and is null and void. The position of the Senate Minority Whip is a Jubilee Party position as per the Azimio Coalition Agreement, and that any removal ought to be from the Jubilee Party in form of a letter and not from anywhere else. And lastly, the positions currently held by Jubilee Party in the Senate were agreed upon by the Azimio Coalition, and that any attempts to remove any member from any position is a violation of the Coalition Agreement. Senator Abdul Haji signs the letter as the National Organizing Secretary of Jubilee Party. Attached to the letter were minutes of a meeting of Jubilee senators stated to have been held on 14th February 2023 at the Serena Hotel, with 4 senators from the Jubilee Party listed to be present and 1 absent with apology. Honorable Senators, the letter by the Senate Minority Whip, reference number MW/ADM/2023 into brackets 24, dated 15th February 2023, and received in my office on the same day, is titled Violation of Human Rights and Procedural Removal of Jubilee Members from Positions. In the latter, the Senate Minority Whip, Senator Fatuma Dulo, MP, alleges, among other things, that due process was not followed in her purported removal from the office of Minority Whip, and that her human rights, as provided for under Article 47 of the Constitution, have been violated. She further alleged that her proposed removal from office of Minority Whip went against fair administrative action and was a violation of the rules of natural justice. She claims that she was never, 1, given any notice whatsoever of the Azimio PG in order to prepare, 2, informed of the reason for which a charge has been brought, 3, given an opportunity to hear the charge and defend any charge that may be leveled against her, and 4, allowed to have legal representation, and lastly, given a written decision of the meeting. She was elected. The second ground is that she was elected as a leader to represent the Jubilee Party from the Azimio La Umoja PG meeting, encompassing all the constituent partners in the coalition, and that it will be fair and procedural for any attempt to remove her to follow the same process. The Jubilee Party and herself were not aware of the alleged Azimio PG meeting, as due process was not followed in the convening of the said meeting. That the Jubilee Party is still in the Azimio Coalition Party and that it has not exited the coalition. That there has been unprocedural removal of Jubilee members from committees of the Senate, the most recent case being the removal of Senator Professor Margaret Kamar, MP, from the Senate Business Committee. That the Jubilee Party should be recognized as the 3rd largest party with rights similar to those enjoyed by other parties, and further, that the existing coalition agreement must be taken into account before any removal from office. Honorable Senators, I'm clear in my mind that at the time the Senate Minority Leader rose on a point of order to demand an immediate communication from the Speaker on what he claimed to be a simple and straightforward matter, he was not aware of the foregoing correspondence with the office of the Speaker, which the office of the Speaker was seized of. It cannot be gainsaid that the office of the Speaker must accord due respect to all senators and must, at very least, give due consideration to any matter brought to the attention of the Speaker by any senator. The outcome of such consideration is, of course, a separate matter altogether. Honorable Senators, having considered the letter of the Senate Minority Leader, the annexures thereto, and the letters by Senator Abdul Haji and Senator Fatuma Dulo, the following questions commend themselves for my determination. 1. What is the procedure, including timelines, required of the Speaker when he receives a communication on changes in the political leadership in the Senate as contemplated in Standing Orders 22 and 23 of the Senate Standing Orders? Second question, what options available to the Speaker where proposed changes in the political leadership in the Senate are contested by an aggrieved political party, senator or senators? Honorable Senators, on the first question, as you may be aware, Part 6 of the Senate Standing Orders provides for the Senate political leadership offices. In respect of the minority party, Standing Order 23.1 provides for election of senators by the minority party to the offices of the Senate Minority Leader, the Deputy Senate Minority Leader, and the Senate Minority Whip, and the Deputy Senate Minority Whip. Standing Order 23 provides for the removal from office of the senator elected to a leadership position. At paragraph 4, 5, and 6, the Standing Order provides as follows. A senator elected under paragraph 1 may be removed by a majority of votes of all senators belonging to the minority party. Paragraph 5 provides as follows. The removal of a senator from office under paragraph 3 shall not take effect until a senator is elected in the manner provided for under paragraph 1, and paragraph 6 provides, upon a decision being made by the minority party under this standing order, the decision of the party shall be communicated to the Speaker in writing, together with the minutes of the meeting at which the decision was made. In the case of removal of the Senate Minority Leader or the Deputy Senate Minority Leader by the Senate Minority Whip, and in the case of removal of the Senate Minority Whip or Deputy Senate Minority Whip by the Senate Minority Leader. Honorable Senators, kindly walk in. Honorable Senators, this is as far as the standing orders go. They neither provide for what the Speaker should do or give an indication of any timelines within which the Speaker should act. This omission may be a matter that Senate may consider for reform in future amendments to the standing orders. Nevertheless, I'm convinced that the omission is not fatal and that it is open to me to draw inspiration from Article 259 8 of the Constitution, which provides, that is in relation to construing the Constitution, that if a particular time is not prescribed for performing a required act, the act shall be done without unreasonable delay and as often as the occasion arises. Indeed, Honorable Senators, we recall that when the Senate Minority Leader raised this matter in the Senate on the 15th of February 2023, I indicated that the communication will be processed in the usual manner, that a communication will be given in terms of standing orders without inordinate delay. Honorable Senators, there are no idle pronouncements. What constitutes a reasonable time must depend on the totality of the circumstances. For example, the communication on proposed changes could be received on a Friday afternoon or during a long recess, as at the end of a session. Clearly, the standing orders do not contemplate that the Speaker will communicate the said changes to the plenary on a weekend, or that the Senate will be called for a special sitting for purposes only of the Speaker communicating the changes to the plenary. This must mean that the gaps occasioned by the standing orders not providing the manner, medium, or timing of communication of the changes must be filled in the manner most consistent with a purposive interpretation of the standing orders, and that seeks to give effect to the letter and spirit of the standing orders rather than to defeat them. Similarly, honorable senators, there can be no doubt that in giving due consideration to the communication received, the Speaker cannot be oblivious of any correspondence pertinent to the matter that is brought to his attention. The upshot of this is that a claim that the Speaker must forthwith, upon receipt of a letter from the Senate minority leader, rush to the chamber and read it to the assembled Senate is without merit, and I reject it. It cannot be. The Speaker must, in each case, properly address himself to the correspondence and any accompanying annexures to satisfy himself as to the compliance with the Standing Order 23. If there is any correspondence on the matter, he must also consider it. The only caveat being that all this must be done within a reasonable time. The importance of bona fide Senate leadership of both sides being a place at all times cannot be gainsaid. Honorable Senators, the lacuna in respect of process and the timelines notwithstanding, we find backing in Standing Order Number 1, which, among other things, provides that in all cases where matters are not expressly provided by the standing orders, any procedural question shall be decided by the Speaker, whose decision shall be based inter alia on the Constitution of Kenya, statute, law, and usages, forms and precedents of Parliament of Kenya and other jurisdictions to the extent that these are applicable to Kenya. Precedent has been set on this matter, where changes in the Senate political leadership were effected during the term of the 12th Parliament. The first time that this matter was addressed by the Speaker was on the 15th and 20th of March 2018, respectively, during the consideration of the proposed removal of the then Senate Minority Leader, the Honorable Moses Wetangula. On this occasion, the Speaker found that the provision of the standing orders had been made in respect of the removal of Senator Wetangula as the Senate Minority Leader, but that the provision of the standing orders on the election of a new Senate Minority Leader to replace him had not been met. The Speaker therefore suspended the removal until and unless another senator was elected in compliance with the standing orders, and communication to that effect with the minutes evidencing the election was made to his office. Honorable Senators, the prerequisite for a lawful removal of a leader are set out in the ruling of the Speaker on that occasion at that one, the removal is undertaken by a majority of the members of the parliamentary party as known and recognized in the Senate in accordance with the standing orders, and B, the minutes evidencing the removal are attached, and the senators who have signed up as supporting such removal are indicated in the said minutes. 3, the removal is communicated to the Speaker by the designated office holder as provided for in the standing order. And 4th, the Speaker peruses, satisfies himself as to the validity, correctness of the documentation received. And lastly, a new senator replacing the removed office holder is validly elected by the recognized political party. Honorable Senators, applying this principle, it is clear that the recognized parliamentary political parties in the Senate at this time are the Kenya Kwanza Coalition as the majority party and the Azimio la Umoja One Kenya Coalition as the minority party. In terms of Standing Order 23-6, the letter by the Senate Minority Leader communicated the decision by 16 senators, being a majority of the members of the minority party, to remove the Senate Minority Whip. The minutes evidencing such removal were attached, and it fell to me to ascertain whether these were in compliance with the standing orders. Honorable Senators, kindly walk in. Honorable Senators, I now turn to the second question, which is the question of the option available to the Speaker where the proposed changes in the political leadership in the Senate are contested by an aggrieved political party, senator, or senators. As stated by Speaker Lusaka in the Senator Wetangula case, and I quote, "It cannot be gainsaid that political parties are recognized under Article 91 of the Constitution and are subject to the requirements thereunder. Political parties are also subject to legislation made pursuant to Article 92 of the Constitution. In the context of the Senate, political parties have the opportunity to present themselves for recognition in the Senate either as single political parties or as an alliance or coalition of parties operating under coalition agreement deposited with the registrar of political parties. It is their prerogative, it is their choice, but when they make that choice, they must abide by the consequences of that choice. Coalitions enjoy the benefit of being a coalition, such as enhanced numbers resulting therefrom, but must similarly put up with the language that comes with a coalition status, such as decision-making required under Standing Order number 23. The meaning of this is that political parties cannot be wild creatures roaming in the national landscape without reference to the Constitution. But similarly, it is not open to their constituent entities to approbate and reprobate in presenting themselves to the Senate. The Senate recognizes single parties presenting themselves for recognition as parliamentary parties or a number of parties presenting themselves to the Senate as a coalition enjoying parliamentary party status. The answer to the second question, therefore, is that it is not open to the Speaker to entertain and find valid the correspondence of a coalition on the status of its leadership and at the same time accept a contrary position on the same matter from the constituent entities or individuals of the same coalition. Honorable Senators, it is therefore my finding, and I so rule, that the letter sent to me by the Senate Minority Leader met the requirements of standing orders as stipulated in Standing Order number 23, and accordingly, Senator Fatuma Adandulo, CBS MP, has been validly removed as the Senate Minority Whip. 2, Senator Ledama Olekina MP has been validly elected as the Senate Minority Whip and is now the Senate Minority Whip. And 3rd, Senator Adrian Watenya Sifuna MP has been validly elected as the Deputy Senate Whip and is now the Deputy Senate Minority Whip. I so rule. Now, Honorable Senators, the Honorable Senator Fatuma Dulo is away on parliamentary business. I direct, and this is to the Minority Leader, the office that she occupied as the Minority Whip contains her personal belongings. I do not expect after this ruling the minority side rush to break the doors and remove or take away the belongings of the Senate of Senator Fatuma Dulo. You shall await until her return. She will open that office. She will be given time to remove her belongings, and it is only after she has removed her belongings that that office will be available to be occupied by her successor. I so direct. Thank you. The next order, clerk.
Order number 3, messages. Order number 4, petitions. Order number 5, papers.
Mr. Speaker, sir, I beg to lay the following papers on the table of this Senate today, Thursday, 16th March 2023. Being 1, the report of the Auditor General on the Madeira Water and Sanitation Company Limited for the year ended 30th of June 2022. 2, report of the Auditor General on the Kirinyaga County Alcoholic Drinks and Substance Abuse Control Fund for the year ended 30th June 2022. 3, report of the Auditor General on the Receiver of Revenue County Government of Kirinyaga for the year ended 30th of June 2022. And 3, the report of the Auditor General on the County Revenue Fund, County Government of Kirinyaga for the year ended 30th of June 2022. 5, report of the Auditor General on the Katanga Community Water Scheme for the year ended 30th of June 2022. Report of the Auditor General on the Murang'a County Education Scholarship Fund for the year ended 30th of June 2022. 7, report of the Auditor General on the Nyeri County Elimu Fund for the year ended 30th of June 2022. 8, report of the Auditor General on the Nyandarua County Bursary Fund for the year ended 30th of June 2022. 9, report of the Auditor General on the Kakamega County Microfinance Corporation for the year ended 30th of June 2022. 10, report of the Auditor General on the Kakamega County Matanyo Health and Family Planning Fund for the year ended 30th of June 2022. 11, report of the Auditor General on the County Executive of Busia for the year ended 30th of June. And Mr. Speaker, sir, finally, report of the Auditor General on the County Assembly of Busia for the year ended 30th of June 2022. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir.
Next order.
Order number 6, notices of motion.
Senator James Murango. Next order.
There is this motion, nominees for appointment as members of the National Climate Change Council. I'm informed by colleagues, the National Assembly has just approved their report, the judge report.
Oh, okay.
So we are suggesting that even before we go to statement, to malizana hii,
Okay.
so that we have a joint certificate signed by the
Okay.
government.
Okay. That is. Honorable Senators, I will proceed to rearrange today's order paper. Reason being that there is a report that we need to adopt. It's a joint report, rather, between us and the National Assembly. And the National Assembly has already moved to debate and adopt that report. So before we move to statements, we will first prosecute order number 8, and thereafter we shall come back to statements. Clerk, kindly call that order.
Order number 8, motion, adoption of the report of the Joint Committee of the National Assembly Departmental Committee on Environment, Forestry and Mining, and the Senate Standing Committee on Land, Environment and Natural Resources on the approval hearing for the nominees for appointment as members of the National Climate Change Council.
Before we adjourned yesterday, the Honorable Senator Chirange was making his contribution, and he has a balance of 6 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. for this opportunity. My final remarks so that my colleagues can have opportunity of contributing to this motion. So, Speaker, I want to congratulate the committees of Land, Environment, Forestry, of the Joint House, that is the National Assembly and the Senate, for this report. As you are aware, Mr. Speaker, sir, the clarion call of the President is one of his biggest trademark, and an agenda is the issue of climate action, climate change, Mr. Speaker, and that is where the wall is. I know many Kenyans, Mr. Speaker, used to think climate change can only be restricted to countries that belong to first world countries, like the America, the Europe, and others. But the climate change is here with us, Mr. Speaker. As you are aware, we are experiencing unusual long drought and famine, which was unheard of when some of us were growing up during our younger days, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, therefore, it is very important that the government comes in and ensures that this climate council is in place, and competent men and women are being appointed to serve as members, Mr. Speaker, sir. The clarion call of the President, Mr. Speaker, has been, and I want to urge Kenyans wherever they are, the rains have begun. Where I come from in Nandi, the rains have begun slightly 2 weeks ago. Nairobi here, throughout the night up today, Mr. Speaker, is raining. I want to challenge all of us senators. Let us be the ones leading by planting the trees. There is nothing as beautiful as planting a tree. It can change the environment. The reason many people, Mr. Speaker, and I always say, the reason many people like to go to hotels is not because of the buildings. It is because where the trees are planted, be it ornamental, be it indigenous, the beauty of the trees that attracts many people, Mr. Speaker. You look even at Karura Forest, where a number of us go and train daily to try and lose weight, Mr. Speaker, and get summer bodies, Mr. Speaker, is the biggest challenge. Mr. Speaker, I'm proud of Nandi because as we talk, Nandi has 3 forests. It's the only county that has 3 forests. Nandi North, Nandi South, and the forest that is near Kapsabet town, Mr. Speaker. And therefore, in the clarion call of the President, that in the next 10 years we should plant at least 15 billion trees, Mr. Speaker. We are aware that the challenges of climate change. So the burden on these men and women that have been appointed and approved by the House to be appointed by the President, Mr. Speaker, is to take that charge and ensure they bring a link between the counties and the national government, Mr. Speaker, sir. Because I know in the past, as a House that protects the interests as per Article 96 of the Constitution, Mr. Speaker, devolution and counties, there will be that link between the National Assembly and the national government and the counties, Mr. Speaker. I want to challenge the council. I have seen there is representation of National Treasury, Ministry of Environment, representation of Council of Governors, Mr. Speaker, where luckily you served as the governor and a member of COG when you serve as the chair JLAC, and I serve as the chair JLAC at the Senate. Then this will bring the synergy in terms of refocusing our energies, Mr. Speaker, into appropriate way of focusing the issue of energy, Mr. Speaker. When you go to Kericho County, Nandi and Bomet, Mr. Speaker, I want to encourage, because when you see the expansive farms, Mr. Speaker, we need to plant trees in those expansive farms so that we can improve on carbon credits. I know when you go to Wazingishi, especially Moiben sub-county, where Senator Jackson Mandago comes from, or AKA Jagma, you see expansive, of course not Jagma of China, Mr. Speaker, but our local Jagma here. Mr. Speaker, when you look at Moiben, the part of Moiben sub-county, the other part is so expansive that you can't even notice a tree. I think it is behold such counties to come up measures of planting trees across the road and anywhere. And also I know Nairobi, at least there is a disease of grabiosis, most of the land. It also challenged the Senate of Nairobi Pier to be part of reclaiming those land and transforming them into the forest, Mr. Speaker, which is very important, Mr. Speaker. So the issue of climate and environment is at the core of our Constitution. And I'm happy this time and age where the President has taken personal initiative. And Mr. Speaker, you know, when we have the blessings, Mr. Speaker, of the highest office, things will move. Like the way today, Mr. Speaker, when we had our blessings when we were launching the OGP and we had the blessings of your office. We want to thank the Secretariat, the Senator colleagues who joined us, led by minority and majority leader, other House leadership, your representatives, even the Secretariat of the House, and even the catering, Mr. Speaker. I'm happy, at least senators today, Mr. Speaker, what a wonderful breakfast, 5-star breakfast. Mr. Speaker, I think you should make it your tradition so that our loyalty is absolute. Make sure at least every morning we can have a 5-star breakfast. With those very, very remarks, Mr. Speaker, I support this motion and hope we can expeditiously and congratulate the members that have been appointed. Thank you very much.
Senator Osotsi.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for the opportunity also to contribute to this very important motion of approval for the nomination of the members of the National Climate Change Council. Mr. Speaker, climate change is a very important topic globally because climate change affects all of us. Someone said yesterday that we used to think that climate change only affects the Western countries and America, but now you can see, right now in Malawi, we are having serious problem. Over 200 people have died as a result of flooding. And the other year we had the same problem in Mozambique. So these are effects of climate change which are affecting even the African continent. So we need to take climate change very, very seriously, and especially in our counties. I know in my county, my governor is an expert in climate change. He has taken very positive steps to put in place serious measures on matters of carbon credit and also on matters of responses to climate change. So this is an important council, and is a council that we should all support. And Mr. Speaker, I know one of the nominees was rejected because of not being able to meet the requirements of this position, because the individuals who serve in this council will be people who will be interacting with the very best people on matters of climate change in various forums globally, and therefore we needed to take our very best personalities to be able to address this matter of climate change. Mr. Speaker, even as we talk about climate change, we need to enhance our efforts to plant more trees across the country, so that we are able to not just earn more carbon credits, but also be able to mitigate the challenges of drought, challenges of climate change, and even the challenges of food security. Because if we can plant trees which are also producing food, that would be killing several birds with one stone. Mr. Speaker, I know there are a lot of funds that are coming to our counties on matters of climate change. We know some counties have misused these funds, and I know the relevant committees that are dealing with this matter. I think you need to go to the bottom of this matter, so that whatever funding that comes to mitigate against climate change is utilized for that purpose. Mr. Speaker, we look forward to these individuals helping this country to position itself as a country that also plays a big role in matters climate change. Mr. Speaker, for those few remarks, I support, and I want to thank you, Mr. Speaker, for making that ruling. On the minority side, we have been longing for that ruling, and I think now we will be able to move on well as one house, which I encourage we continue with our bipartisan arrangement that we have had, and position Senate as a house of honor and a house of dignity, so that we move forward. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I support.
Senator Chiriot.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for this chance. I join the rest of my colleagues, Mr. Speaker, in supporting this motion, motion brought to us by the Joint Committee of National Assembly and the Senate Departmental Committees on Environment, Forestry and Mining, and the Senate Standing Committee on Land, Environment and Natural Resources, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this committee approved the nomination of 3 appointees, or nominees rather, and rejected 1. Mr. Speaker, it's important that as a House we reflect on the importance of the National Climate Change Council. This morning, Mr. Speaker, I was woken up by a very beautiful sound, something that we haven't had in quite a while, and we're beginning to get extremely worried. Most residents of this city this morning woke up to the sound of rain, Mr. Speaker. It was pounding quite heavy, and it felt extremely nice, Mr. Speaker, because you know full well that the last few months have been extremely difficult for us as a country. For those of us that come from the food basket areas, we've been extremely worried, Mr. Speaker, going home every other weekend to be covered in dust. Even the hard crops that hardly go dry, Mr. Speaker, like tea, which is a crop that sometimes can stay for months without rain but will still maintain its green color, was beginning to get yellow, Mr. Speaker. And I was increasingly getting worried and wondering, what is it that you can do? And I reflected back on all the conversations that we've had about climate change and getting people to socialize themselves with the concept of what exactly is climate change, Mr. Speaker, and the fact that our environment and the climate in general, Mr. Speaker, continues to change. And if we do not do something as a human population, then we might turn up to be the cursed generation, Mr. Speaker, the one that left the earth worse than when we found it. Our forefathers, Mr. Speaker, did a better job. If you visit many of our counties, you will realize that we enjoy very good tree cover, courtesy of the good job that were done by our predecessors. Many people, if you remember back when you were young, and even those that are way much older, Mr. Speaker, tree planting and generally being mindful of the environment, seeing where we litter, Mr. Speaker, is something that they were accustomed to. Unfortunately, Mr. Speaker, one of the ugly sins that you will see is that you can actually run into well-cultured, properly educated, very wealthy, and sometimes intelligent-looking Kenyans. But when it comes to matters of environment, they behave in a very stupid way, Mr. Speaker. It's not unusual, Mr. Speaker, to drive down Kenyatta Avenue and see somebody open the window of a brand new Mercedes or a Range Rover and throw out a trash of Coca-Cola can or any other thing. You wonder, Mr. Speaker, what goes on in the minds of such people? Who do they imagine will wake up to just come and pick the trash that they have thrown out of their windows, Mr. Speaker? We have become what is colloquially referred to as environmentally stupid, Mr. Speaker. We do things that continue to hurt our climate, but do not bother, do not mind about it, Mr. Speaker. Yet, Mr. Speaker, if you move around the world, and the privilege of serving as a member of parliament, Mr. Speaker, affords each and every one of us the chance to travel far and wide to almost every corner of the globe, Mr. Speaker. And if you travel to many cities, one of the things that continue to distinguish between cities that are well planned, cities that are organized, cities that have got order and decency, is how they take care of the climate and environment generally, the policies that they espouse, the decisions that are made by the leaders to ensure that we guide and we take good care of our environment, Mr. Speaker. That is the work of this council that we are putting together, Mr. Speaker, courtesy of an act of parliament that we passed here, Mr. Speaker, in 2016, and established this National Climate Change Council. And I am happy, Mr. Speaker, because when we had the debate on this bill, Mr. Speaker, and I remember quite vividly, Mr. Speaker, we said that it is good because environment has become such a topical issue globally that this committee is chaired by none other than the president of this country. And we actually, this is one of the few functions, Mr. Speaker, that we assigned directly to the office of a deputy president. We insisted by law, it is in this act, Mr. Speaker, that the vice chair of this council is a deputy president, Mr. Speaker. Why did you do this, Mr. Speaker? Because we considered this to be an extremely important council that will generate and guide the country in making environmentally smart laws and pieces of legislation, policies, and general guidance to society, Mr. Speaker, on how we take care of our environment, Mr. Speaker. Therefore, it is my wish, Mr. Speaker, that as this committee settles down, they will get on with business, begin the very beautiful exercise of ensuring that many of the decisions that we have made as a people that continue to erode on the gains that have been made, Mr. Speaker, we attend each year. In fact, Mr. Speaker, you know, earlier this year when we were in Sharm el-Sheikh, I think Kenya was in Egypt. Kenya was among the countries that had the highest delegation of environmental contributors and activist players in that particular space. And when you sat together with them most of the evenings, you asked them, where exactly do you ply your trade? Because if there is a country, and I know this for a fact, Mr. Speaker, having traveled far and wide across this continent, that continues to have less forest cover, Mr. Speaker, unfortunately, Kenya happens to be one of them. And we don't have a choice, Mr. Speaker. Many people continue to argue about food prices and all these things that we are doing. Yet we keep on forgetting that Kenya is by and large an arid land. 86% of our land is arid. The only part of our land that you can enjoy good forest cover and that is fertile, can easily grow, is only 14%, as opposed to even on neighboring countries like Uganda, which is almost 90% arable land. That's why they continue to produce food cheaply, better than us, Mr. Speaker. The only way we can catch up is if we have good climate policies, Mr. Speaker, that can only be churned if this committee settles down and does their work as is expected of them. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, as we approve this committee, Mr. Speaker, I expect that the 3 members that have been approved and one that unfortunately has been rejected by the committee, Mr. Speaker, that these 3 members who have been approved by both houses, Mr. Speaker, that they will settle down quickly and get on work, fold their sleeves and begin the work that needs to be done. I want to laud the efforts that have been made by the President in forming the Nairobi River Commission, Mr. Speaker. It's extremely important, and I saw the kind of sentiments that were being mentioned by residents of this city and those who live further down the line, like residents of Kitui and makwiny, Mr. Speaker, on what we need to do. Those of us that grew up in this city, Mr. Speaker, know how beautiful the Nairobi Yacht Club used to be, how beautiful the Nairobi River used to be, until we became what I continue to refer, Mr. Speaker, as environmentally stupid. We preferred money over lives, Mr. Speaker, where you find people that are setting up big industries. They churn out profits, yet they continue to litter their waste into public rivers, Mr. Speaker. That is part of the work that we expect this council to reverse actually that particular trend and ensure that anybody who messes up with the climate generally and the environment holistically, Mr. Speaker, will meet the full force of the law so that we can live a better environment for future generations, Mr. Speaker. I don't expect the less of them, Mr. Speaker, because in this committee, we also ensure that we included the chairpersons of the Council of Governors, because counties, Mr. Speaker, play an important role insofar as climate-related policies is concerned, Mr. Speaker. They make laws at the county assemblies, and even governors generate policies to ensure that their counties are well taken care of, that their decisions and the licenses that they continue to issue, even to businesses, those businesses have cultures and practices that protect our climate, Mr. Speaker. And that is why I find it important to have that the chairperson of the Council of Governors will, at any given time, be a member of this particular committee, Mr. Speaker. And therefore, we expect of them that they shall sit down and approve and oversee our national climate change action plan. What is it that is expected of us? We must appreciate and laud the Ministry of Environment, which at least have scored big on the policy of 15 billion trees in the next 10 years, Mr. Speaker. But I met and I bumped into Senator Soipan Tuya, the Cabinet Secretary for Environment, a few days ago. And I challenged her and I said, as a senator who leads the people of Kericho, I expect to know what is our expected share of contribution so that I can lead the effort. I know for a fact that if you challenge Senator, my good friend, the neighbor, Senator from Kisii, chances are, even him, he doesn't know what is the expectation of them, despite Kisii and Kericho, for example, being among the countries that have got an above 10% forest cover, Mr. Speaker. But there's an expectation on our side. Is it 1 million, 5 million, 10? I need to know so that we keep track together over the period. And you know, Mr. Speaker, this campaign is not just about planting trees. It's about growing trees, ensuring that after planting it, you maintain it even for the next 10 or 15 years until it becomes a fully mature tree, Mr. Speaker. That's part of the action plan. On the score of marketing that particular program, I give them an A. But I have told the Cabinet Secretary for Environment that we expect before this House, Mr. Speaker, a report that will tell us this is what is expected of your particular county, so that we can sit down with our members of our county assembly, you know, and have a conversation about how they are going to budget. Because to grow a tree, for example, Mr. Speaker, has to have a budgetary allocation. It's not just enough to buy tree seedlings and put them on the ground. There has to be a budget for maintaining it, Mr. Speaker. And we must allow the counties that we have seen, some of them speak about this. I have seen some plan over Nairobi and many other counties, and we challenge ourselves so that we have a conversation about how we shall achieve the National Climate Action Plan, Mr. Speaker. Of course, I know part of the things that they need to do is also provide policy direction on research and training on climate change, including on the collection and dissemination of information relating to climate change to the relevant levels of government. That is both county and national, including the public and stakeholders. Research is extremely important in this program, Mr. Speaker. Every time people gather for COP conferences, from Glasgow to London to Sharm el-Sheikh in Egypt, and I think next year in Dubai, the world continues to churn new research information about climate change, Mr. Speaker, and things that countries are doing to ensure that we protect and we have a good climate in our countries, Mr. Speaker. It is important that this committee fulfills one of its key mandates in sharing and disseminating this information, so that as county governments sit down to plan, Mr. Speaker, they know what is expected of them. If you travel, Mr. Speaker, in many of our counties, and I've said this even including to my own governor, that I don't expect when you're in charge of a county, you're a young person, well-educated, that this business where you find young people are setting up car washes alongside riverbeds and destroying the environment shall continue to happen during our administration. And this is something that we see across almost all our counties, Mr. Speaker. It's a reckless and unfortunate practice. Because for sure, if you're washing cars, you're mixing oil, soap, and you know very well that downstream, there are people whose livelihood depend on the same river. Surely, what is your mind telling you, Mr. Speaker? And these are the policies that you expect that will feature part and prominently of the information that will be disseminated to our county governments, and expect them to act and ensure that we have a good platform for ensuring that we have achieved this Marshall Plan, Mr. Speaker. Finally, Mr. Speaker, and just a final word, because I know many of my colleagues perhaps wish to also contribute, is that while reading, I must note with great impression, Mr. Speaker, the work that has been done by this committee. If you read through the CV of Madam, let me get her name correctly, Mr. Speaker, because I took time to read through and see what is it that he has studied, Mr. Speaker. A lady by the name Umra Omar, whose nomination unfortunately has been rejected by this committee. You will realize that she's a well-educated Kenyan, Mr. Speaker, has a master's degree in social justice from the World Learning Institute, Mr. Speaker, USA, has also a bachelor's of arts degree in neuroscience psychology from Oberlin College in Ohio. Or if it was Senator Sufuna, chances I would have said Ohio. Something close to that, Mr. Speaker. You would have, and this lady is well educated. It's not for want of good education that she has been rejected. But the committee has pointed out that her understanding of matters environment, unfortunately, was found to be wanting. That is what we expect of our committees when they vet people, Mr. Speaker. That is not just sufficient to say, you know, I've gone to school. You might have gone to school, but have studied a topic that is completely unrelated to the work for which you have been nominated, Mr. Speaker. If we begin to fill up our public institutions with people that have relevant knowledge and expertise, Mr. Speaker, then we shall achieve great things as a country. Therefore, I want to laud the work of this committee It's unfortunate that a Kenyan has been denied an opportunity, but not on account of the fact that she has gone to school well, Mr. Speaker, but the fact that her experience was found to be wanting in that specific field, Mr. Speaker. I expect that in future, if she gets another public appointment in topic, something that is related to her training, we shall expeditiously vet her and approve of her, Mr. Speaker. Otherwise, kudos to the team that did on this exercise and ensure that as a House, we also participate in this particular exercise, Mr. Speaker. I hope when we pass other laws, Mr. Speaker, increasingly, if you notice, from around 2015 to 2016, almost all legislative business that came to this House, so long as it made its way to the Senate, and there was a process of nomination, we ensured that the vetting process was done in a bicameral manner. Any of these vetting exercises, unfortunately, some of which are constitutional, therefore, as a House, our powers are limited on what you can do, but at least on those that are made by statute, we shall ensure that the Senate has its place, just like our colleagues in the National Assembly in vetting these nominees. So I appreciate our team that looked into this law that ensured Senate participates in this extremely important program. I thank you, Mr. Speaker, and wish the nominees well as they begin their work, of course, once after this House passes their nomination. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Senator Oburu.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir, for this opportunity. Mr. Speaker, I want to take this opportunity, first of all, to sincerely thank you for the ruling which you have just made on the issue of the changes on the side of the minority. Mr. Speaker, I have been very, very uncomfortable for the last 3 weeks that we have had this altercation on the issue of this leadership, because Mr. Speaker, in my view, I thought that it was a very minor issue. It was an issue more of a procedure, and it could not have affected our participation as much as it did. Mr. Speaker, it is unfortunate that that issue brought a lot of misunderstanding, but finally we have come to a positive conclusion. And Mr. Speaker, I thank you for the ruling. Mr. Speaker, having said that, I also stand to support this motion. Mr. Speaker, this is a very, very important motion. It is something which is very popular in the developed world, but here in our country, people give it a second line. They put it at the back of the business. Mr. Speaker, it is a very, very, very important council, because, Mr. Speaker, I remember when I was a young boy, my father, who was a teacher, knew the importance of planting trees. They knew the importance of trees affecting the rainfall. And Mr. Speaker, I remember me and my brother, young brother Raila, we used to stay in Bondo in the rural areas. And my father used to work in Kisumu, but he would give us an assignment to plant trees, and he would come to supervise us every weekend and see that we not only plant trees, but we protect them against destruction by the animals. We also make sure that, he also makes sure that we water them so that they start growing, and make sure that they grow to maturity. And some of the trees we planted in the 50s, early 50s, Mr. Speaker, are still there. I will take some of you who are my friends like Chariot, come and see some of those big trees we planted in the early 50s. And Mr. Speaker, I live around the lake. My constituency and my county is around Lake Victoria. Lake Victoria is more or less like a rain shadow, Mr. Speaker. It is a rain shadow because there is evaporation which takes place. But this evaporation goes to Kericho, it goes to Kisii, it goes to Nandi. they benefit from the lake, but we don't benefit from the lake. Mr. Speaker, because there is little rainfall around the lake. So we are more or less a semi-arid county, or we have our counties around the lake are more or less semi-arid, Mr. Speaker. But Mr. Speaker, the best for us would have been to harvest water, which comes from our rivers, and all our rivers. In fact, most of the rivers draining into Lake Victoria are from our region. In fact, from Kenya. Most of them are from Kenya. And Mr. Speaker, they all drain coming from Nandi, coming from Kericho, like the Miriu River, the Nyando River, the Nzoia River, coming from those hills around Cherangani, and so on. Mr. Speaker, they drain not only the water, but they also go with our topsoil, which is the most fertile, Mr. Speaker. And all of it goes down up to Egypt. And Egypt has a big dam, which is called a Swan Dam. And they use our water to do irrigation, to produce electricity, and then grow food, and export back to us, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this is a very, very serious situation, and we hope that the government is taking note so that some of these rivers can be dammed, like the Kericho, this is the Koru Soin Dam. Yeah, the Koru Soin Dam. Honorable Secretariat, please, let's work together and see that that dam is actualized, so that it can produce electricity and it can also control the floods downstream. Mr. Speaker, we cannot overemphasize the importance of climate change. Mr. Speaker, our country is experiencing a very serious drought which we have never had in the last 40 years. And Mr. Speaker, personally, this kind of drought I only experienced in 1952 when I was still a small kid. Mr. Speaker, this kind of drought was called Aronga in my area. And Mr. Speaker, the government of the day does not appear to realize that we are going through a very, very serious situation, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this country is in ICU. And Mr. Speaker, the government of the day is behaving as if it is a normal situation. They are still using the IMF prescriptions, which they know brought a lot of trouble for very many governments in the 80s and in the 90s. Mr. Speaker, there are governments which collapsed just because of ignoring taking the IMF prescriptions, which our government is taking. Mr. Speaker, there's nothing wrong with the economic theories of the IMF and the prescriptions they are giving of austerity. But Mr. Speaker, those austerities belong to normal times. But it appears, Mr. Speaker, that our government is giving treatment which is for malaria, and they don't realize that their patient is actually in ICU. Mr. Speaker, the prescriptions which should be given should be for ICU and not for normal malaria, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I cannot overemphasize the importance of climate change, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I know that they were used to, during colonial times, we used to have a law or a treaty which was signed during colonial times in 1927. It was abrogated, I think, by Martha Karua when she was Minister of Water. And Mr. Speaker, that means that we can now use our waters, we can now do irrigation, but we also have to continue planting trees, Mr. Speaker, so that we can try to mitigate what is happening in Europe. Mr. Speaker, it is Europe and America which is polluting the air. And that pollution which they are creating in the air is actually the one creating serious and adverse climate change, which is affecting us, even though we don't produce as much of that gas as much as they do. But Mr. Speaker, much as we are affected, they are also ready to compensate us through what they call the carbon trade. But Mr. Speaker, other countries are taking advantage of the carbon trade. But I have not seen Kenyans or even the government itself taking this trade in carbon seriously, so that we can also benefit from some of the provisions which some of those very big companies emitting so much and polluting the air heavily pay to mitigate the tree planting and other measures which we take in our developing countries. Mr. Speaker, I would want to finish by supporting the appointment of these three Kenyans who are highly qualified, Mr. Speaker, because, Mr. Speaker, when I saw the name of Professor Odero Uta, there was somebody I know very well who is not only qualified, but is so committed to this matter of climate change. Mr. Speaker, I try to mirror all the rest of the appointees through Odera, because I know then there is seriousness in dealing with this issue of climate change by making this appointment. Mr. Speaker, I conclude by supporting this motion, and I thank you, Mr. Speaker, for the opportunity.
Senator Wamatenga.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, for giving me this opportunity to contribute. I sat through the committee of vetting, Mr. Speaker, and I was very, very impressed, as Senator Oburu has said, by the number and the knowledge of people.
Senator Wamatenga, before you proceed, kindly confirm that you are the senator who seconded this motion.
Yes, I am.
Then I'm afraid you may have to yield. Thank you. Senator Murango.
Asante Mstahiki Spika kwa kunuku nafasi ili niweze kuchangia mswada huu wa upanzi wa miti. Na ningemuuliza Senator Omburu, wakati unaalika marafiki zako kama Senator Cheriot kuona ile miti mliopanda, pia ualike maandui zako kama mimi. Pia nitakuja pia nione, kwa sababu upanzi wa miti ni wa kila mtu. Mstahiki Spika, kubadilika kwa hali ya hewa kuna changiwa pakubwa na kukosa kupanda miti, sana sana ile miti ya kiasili katika mahali maji mingi inapotoka. Na nimesikia pia Senator Omburu akisema ya kwamba maji inaenda Lake Victoria alafu inapanda juu, inanyesha sehemu za juu. Lakini ningetaka kuambia kwamba pia hiyo mito inakurudishia maji yako Lake Victoria. Kwa hivyo faida ni pande zote mbili. Mstahiki Spika, leo pia najua kwa sababu niko na mswada ambao una upanzi wa miti na kuna miti ambayo hatufai kupanda. Nitasimama tu kuunga mkono haja hiyo na niseme ya kwamba mvua ishaanza kunyesha, kwa hivyo tupande miti kwa wingi ili tuweze kuhifadhi sehemu ambacho chemichemi zinatoka na tuweze kupata mvua kutosha. Asante sana Mstahiki Spika.
Senator Murango, kindly have your seat. Senator Karungo, sorry, have a seat. I want to make a communication. Honorable Senators, I will interrupt debate to make this communication, and then we shall resume debate. I would like to acknowledge the presence in the public gallery this afternoon, a visiting delegation from Rukanga Secondary School in Kirinyaga County. The delegation comprises 3 teachers and 44 students who are in the Senate for a one-day study tour. Honorable Senators, in our usual tradition of receiving and welcoming visitors to Parliament, I extend a warm welcome to them, and on behalf of the Senate and on my own behalf, wish them a fruitful visit. I will allow the Senator for Kirinyaga to make short, welcoming remarks.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'll take this opportunity to welcome Lukanga Secondary School. Lukanga Secondary School is in Kirinyaga West, and I would like to encourage the students in Lukanga that as long as they can see their senator here, because I have a long story, they can also make it in life. Gone are the times that we tell the student they are leader of tomorrow. I am ready, and I'm very much aware that when my time comes, I need a leader who can replace me as a senator for Kirinyaga and even go further than I've already gone. So I want to welcome them and wish them all the best. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Senator Onyoka, resume debate.
Mr. Speaker, thank you very much for giving me this opportunity. First of all, I would like to welcome the young trailblazers, Mr. Speaker, who have come to this house from Kisii, and many of them happen to be university students who have for a long time been struggling with their lives, trying to find out what to do with their lives. I'm happy and I congratulate them for coming here. At the same time, Mr. Speaker, I would like to welcome the students who have come with their teachers to come and see what is in this Senate. And I'm happy, Mr. Speaker, that today they are actually coming when we are normal. I think if they had come here some 2-3 days ago, they would have thought that this House or Parliament, for that matter, is a place where we are constantly having adversarial relationships and where we make noise at each other. No. Mr. Speaker, I would like to contribute to this motion for the simple reason that, like everybody else has said, the motion, the debate on the environment is a very current debate. And the reason for that, Mr. Speaker, is that if you look at what has been happening, and many of my colleagues have discussed it, many of my colleagues have raised the issue that for the last, most probably 1 month, it's been very hot, abnormally hot. You find that the rains which we had expected to have started last month, everybody is actually relieved that it is raining in Nairobi. Mr. Speaker, I happen to come from Kisii. Normally in Kisii, the rains start around January, February, March. And it is only last week that the rain started falling, and it was exciting. The truth is, Mr. Speaker, even when we have challenges about what our environment has become, I think to a large extent, Mr. Speaker, we also need now to start looking at the options available. What is the government policy? And I was hoping that my friend and brother, Cherargei, and the leader of majority would have been here. Mr. Speaker, as you know, most of the forest cover is within our county governments. All the way from Kwale, Kilifi, if you come all the way up to Taita Taveta, you go down to the Rift Valley, Nakuru County, you go down to Kisii, you go Trans Nzoia, which is in Kitale, and you look at the whole of Nyanza, all the 4 counties of Nyanza. You'll realize that yes, in Nyanza, our forest cover has been quite high. But again, Mr. Speaker, the problem like we have in Kisii, the forest cover is actually high and it's reasonably good. If you arrive in Kisii, you'll be shocked. The whole place looks green. The only problem, Mr. Speaker, is that we have planted the wrong trees. We have planted the blue gum. And the reason why the blue gum has been planted, and many, many technocrats, many people educated on environmental issues have been discussing, saying, remove these trees so that you can plant the ones that don't consume a lot of water. because the blue gum is a problem. And in fact, several leaders have tried to do that, and they started approaching the solving of this problem from the wrong end. The blue gum in Kisii is an economic activity. It is not seen as a forest maintenance or forest sustenance activity. Why? Because people plant trees. The trees take about 5 years to grow. By that time, somebody has got about 60 trees. Every tree is sold for 10,000 shillings, and in 10 years, somebody has got 600,000. And that is why when you tell them Kisii to actually cut down the blue gums and plant eucalyptus, they tell you to go to hell. So number one, Mr. Speaker, I believe that the team that has been appointed or selected and is been going to be approved, I hope they will come up with solutions that are going to be locally based, that are going to be effective, and that are going to have the community understand that even when the forest provides, or when trees provide a source of income, Mr. Speaker, it is also important for the public to be given an alternative as to what they can plant other than the trees which they believe they are making some revenue out of it. Mr. Speaker, I see the Senator of Nakuru here. I was growing up when, if you travel down to Naivasha and you start when you have entered into Naivasha from Kinungi and you are going all the way down and you go through past the Delemere area and in fact get up to Gilgil. One man who nobody would most probably remember planted trees in that place. If you look at Naivasha as you're going down, Madam Senator, on the left and the right, there are some trees which have been growing there, and I don't know whether Kenyans know. That man was called Kariuki Chotara. When he planted those trees, everybody was laughing and saying, this man has most probably gone crazy. How did he decide that they are going to plant the trees there? But Kariuki Chotara, again, out of the very many things that President Moi did that were good, one of the things that he was given credit for is that Moi was actually an environmentalist, and is the one who encouraged Kariuki Chotara, Paul Ngei, and all the older generation politicians to plant trees in their areas. And these are examples that we as leadership can emulate. Number three, Mr. Speaker, my honest observation is that in Kenya, we have not done an audit, a proper audit, to know which trees we need to plant in certain areas, to know even some of the trees, how long do they take to grow, to figure out what we are going to do. The reason, Mr. Speaker, is very simple. Our spatial plans, which we are supposed to have in every area, whether it's every county, whether it's every sub-county, they are not available. And therefore, even when you are looking at the policies on how we are going to improve the standards of our environmental development and our environmental growth and management, we must look at the policy issues so that we can approach our issues on global warming and environmental development with a comprehensive approach. And this approach, Mr. Speaker, is to make sure that you look at everything, you take the region, you agree that this is what you are going to do. And in certain areas where it is very dry, like Eastern Kenya, Northeastern Kenya, and some of the eastern areas, Mr. Speaker, using River Tana, using all our rivers that we have, I don't understand why we never plant trees and use irrigation. We only talk about growing maize for irrigation. And yet, Mr. Speaker, in some areas, and I've been seeing, if you look on TV, you'll see this company that provides the drilling of water boreholes and everything. You'll see that in some of the areas in Laikipia, in some of the areas in Kajiado, they are actually encouraging farmers to now grow trees, because the trees act like wind covers. Because sometimes when the winds are flowing, the wind comes up and blows off all the sand and the soils. I would like to encourage the team that is coming so that they can engage this house. The Senate is a house that takes care of the counties. The Senate has interest of the counties at heart. Can we have a blueprint which can interface with the National Assembly so that we can then come up with a strategy on how we can encourage our county governments, how we can facilitate them, how we can give them funding, because we participate in that exercise, so that the national government doesn't come from Nairobi where the president will come and he plants maybe 20 trees or 30 trees for one event which is taking place, and after he leaves, nothing happens. And Mr. Speaker, I think one other thing that we need to do is that if you ask me today, who is the forest officer in Kisii County, I don't even know. The forest office doesn't have the profile. Nobody has exposed them to us. I don't even think that the governor of Kisii or even the members of the county assembly know who the forest officer is. And these are things that we now need to wake up and begin to come up with interventions so that we make sure that we can change the direction our country is taking so that we increase the forest cover like we've been advised to do. Another issue, Mr. Speaker, look at UNEP. We have a world organization stationed in Nairobi, United Nations Environmental Program. I don't think in the last 3 years I have seen any relationship or any engagement between the national government, county governments, and the officials of the UNEP as to how they can help us. Everything is usually superficial, where maybe the president, if he goes to UNEP when there's a big conference, he'll go there once and that's it. And yet this is the international environmental program agency, and we hardly have any contact with them. I believe that this team that has been given this responsibility will come up and engage and make sure that we change the direction that we've been managing our forests. Finally, Mr. Speaker, I'd like to say that our universities, I know there's been an issue where everybody's talking about, oh, now we need subjects where university students are going to be, they just need, now all university students need skills, and the skills are to do A, B, C, D, and organize. I just think our government needs to encourage university students to get into environmental studies, which is a study that has always been despised and disregarded. I think the government, for example, needs to encourage students to be given bursaries and to be given scholarships so that many of our bright young men and women can actually engage in environmental studies to make sure that we now push our country in a direction where we are responsible, where we make sure we know how to deal with our rivers, where we don't politicize everything. Mr. Speaker, you notice a wonderful idea about the Mau Forest, where everybody has said, let us keep our water towers. But every time we discuss and agree on what we are going to do with our water towers, immediately the politics comes, then you have the clan issues coming in, then you have the tribal issues coming in, then you have people from the Rift Valley beginning to scream at each other about why we are not going to the Mau Forest to grow maize, so that or to grow crops, or to grow all sorts of things, so that we can make quick money out of it. And in fact, those forests are unnecessary or the equivalent. I think now people are beginning to realize that we must begin to look at our environment seriously. We must look at how we manage our water seriously. We must begin to look at how we manage our lakes. We must begin how to look at the blue economy. How are we managing all these items, or all these sectors which contribute directly into the management of the economy, of our economy, but at the same time, the environment which is making us survive as individuals. Finally, Mr. Speaker, on a conclusion, I would like to say that it's always a pleasure to remember that we had people like Wangari Maathai, one of the people in this country who is highly regarded and internationally, and you can see what she did, Mr. Speaker. How I wish that many of our young people, many of our students, many of our children, grandchildren could take it upon themselves that they actually know that if we do not make sure that we maintain our environment and make sure we get the right forest cover, make sure we protect our rivers, make sure we take care of generally of our own sustainability, even the air. Mr. Speaker, you notice Nairobi is reasonably not polluted, but at the rate at which we are bringing in cars, Nairobi now, Kenya receives about 30,000 cars every year. In the next 10 years, you'll be having 3 million cars on the highways. What are we going to do with the pollution? How are we going to manage our pollution? Why are we not encouraging more electrical cars to be used in Kenya? Why are we continuing to use fossil fuels? We are now using petrol and diesel as if nothing is happening. I think these are issues that the Senate and all of us in this House can sit and continue to interrogate so that we can achieve a greater purpose for our being around here. Mr. Speaker, thank you for giving me this opportunity and taking so much time to discuss this. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Senator Onyonka. Senator Abbas Sheikh.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I also want to join my colleagues to support the motion and congratulate the appointees of the Council. Mr. Speaker, as you are aware, climate change has now become a big disaster, especially in Africa. But the polluters, the people who have industrialized, the America and Europe and all those places where there's a lot of industrialization, it's causing a lot of havoc. And actually, what we now need to do is actually to impress on these people that they must pay for the pollution that they're now doing. The people who are suffering in Africa must be compensated for the consequences of the industrialist countries. Mr. Speaker, this country called Kenya is a beautiful country once upon a time, but today it has been a land of contrast. The country does used to have, beautiful environment. It used to have a lot of forest, but unfortunately of late, it's now been turned to desert. As a result of deforestation taking place, a lot of settlement, the population has increased. And instead of settling, where the settlements are, everybody is starting new settlements, cutting trees, deforestation is happening. I think it's a high time that we need to control also. As a result of the population expansion, we need also to control. And we need to start what we call, if you go in Europe and other places, you will see the farmlands, and you will see where the towns are. There's actually these differences. There are places that you are not allowed to settle. But however, in Kenya today, everybody settles where he wants or where she wants. And I think that should be discouraged. The big land for farming, the big land for food production is actually being divided into small units that is actually unproductive almost. Therefore, it's a high time that we need control and come up with a policy that controls the land use issues. Where you have forest, it should be a forest. Where we have a grazing land, it should be a grazing land. Where we have a farm, it is a farmland. Where we have people to settle, it should be different actually. However, having said that, Mr. Speaker, I think the most unfortunate thing is the people who are most affected are the people in the acid areas. They are in the same arid areas. Today, as I talk here, the last 5 seasons, there was no rain in Ireland, the acid areas. 9% almost died, and this actually has destroyed the mainstay and the livelihood of the pastoralists. About 10 million Kenyans today have no source of income. They have no food security. And we thank God that now it has started raining. But however, those animals are all died. And those people today don't know where they will get source of income and source of food. It's a high time that I think the government has a plan in the program of restocking the animals, because that land can only be used for livestock keeping. One other thing is actually it's a high time that we need to change our lifestyle. We need to produce food now. The land, 7% of this country is marginal land. And food production can still be used under irrigation. If today Saudi Arabia is producing food in surplus, Egypt is producing in surplus, I think Kenya has a better land, and we have all the resources available. But however, our priorities are upside down. We cannot be relying on only Rift Valley and part of the country to produce food for us. It's a high time that we need to change our policies, that we need to produce food everywhere, so that this country can be food secure. As it is today, 90% of Kenyans are food secure. We are now becoming a consumer country. We are importing food, like fruits and all the other things, from our neighborhoods, Uganda, Tanzania, Ethiopia, And this country has a better environment and a better land. But however, we don't have very serious policies that will now enforce food production. So I think now we cannot make a repeat every year that we will always ask for food. This country now today we have IDPs as a result of animals dying, people because they have been so much affected. There are people now being fed by the world of NGO world. So I think this is actually a shame of this country. We cannot afford our people to be fed by the international organizations every time when the circle has shut out. Mr. Speaker, now as you see, it has rained. The water is draining to the seas and oceans. What we need to do is actually we need to have a very serious water harvesting. That we need to harvest the water now. So at least by the time the rains will fail, then we will have enough water that will have at least been harvested, that we have big dams, we have at least water reservoirs that can be able to take us across the board. Mr. Speaker, I think one other thing is the council, that is the Climate Change Council, is actually a new council. But you know, most of our councils and authorities, especially like anything to do with climate change, is actually donor-driven. And they become moribund after a short time. When the donors withdraw the money, they become moribund, they become institutions, and they become, they have no use, use to anybody else, onto the country. Therefore, we shall not be relying on donors always. If the council actually should be fully funded, so that at least they can have impact on in the future and now and in the future. So that we, institutions like, NDMA is, a very important the institution that is actually able to help us in drought management, but it's actually poorly funded. So with the same council now we form, tomorrow we will not be getting enough funds. Then we will have, it's going to be useless forming those kind of councils, and so those kinds of institutions. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, one other thing is actually, this council, I expected the council at least to have the faces of the people who are really affected by the climate change. The pastoralists who have really been affected should have been part of this council so that at least they'll be able to help the people, and because they know, they understand the situation on the climate change effect. Well, therefore, I hope next time when these kind of appointments are taking place, I'll bring to His Excellency the President and whoever is concerned to at least consider those people who have been, at least, everybody has a specialization. People have been specialized in different places of food production. I therefore say that forming the council is one thing, and functionality and, making difference is another thing. If you are aware, this country, the second president, His Excellency the late Moi, actually has done a wonderful job during his tenure. You remember, we used to do a lot of soil conservation, we used to do a lot of forestation, and as a result, I think our even forest cover has increased. That is kind of the issues. What we want now is that kind of engagement to the public must be engaged. Students will be encouraged. Schools should have some forestations, and therefore, so that at least we can have a better forest cover. I think the thing which is causing us a lot of problem is these unnecessary settlements, where everybody is settling where he wants or she wants. That should not be done. We must be having some collective places where people settle, and places where we can do some farming and people can produce food. With those few remarks, I beg to support.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Crystal Asige.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I am very pleased that the council, this Climate Change Council, has been constituted, and I congratulate the nominees that have been appointed to work on the council. Mr. Speaker, everyone has in this House, and I think across the globe, acknowledged the importance of climate change action, and that we need to, even though Africa only emits about 4% of emissions globally, the lowest, we are the hardest hit and affected by the impacts of climate change. Mr. Speaker, that's no different in Kenya, and I'm very, very glad to see this council being put together, and I'm sure that they're going to do fantastic work. Mr. Speaker, I rise to support the motion, but only in part. The other part for me, Mr. Speaker, would be to make further considerations, because there is a concern that I'm seeing in the country, and perhaps even through the council, what I've read about it so far, that we are forgetting or leaving behind, similarly to what Senator Abbas has just said, the faces that will represent the diversity that is Kenya in this council, and of course the matters and the agendas therein. Mr. Speaker, what I'm talking about is that in my own studies and interests and passions, where they all lie, Mr. Speaker, I have not really found any conversations being had about inclusive climate change action or justice. When I say inclusive, Mr. Speaker, I mean for it to be all-encompassing, to represent vulnerable groups, to represent marginalized groups, and those all include persons with disabilities, of course, you'll know that I will say, children, youth, women, and other marginalized groups, Mr. Speaker. I again call this inclusive climate action or climate justice. And I wish that the title even would include the word inclusive, which is National Inclusive Climate Change Council, so that this is clear to Kenyans that is important to us to be addressing. Mr. Speaker, climate change focal points are not at all inclusive of persons with disabilities. Neither are the strategic plans. Not only am I referring, Mr. Speaker, to how it will affect different types of PWDs, but also the increased impacts expected across varying social categories, like gender, geography, social condition, economic status, and so on. Mr. Speaker, PWDs are not reflected in policies, not reflected in strategies, or national action plans on combating climate change crisis. Sustainable settlements, inclusive urbanization require a universally designed approach more than ever. Mr. Speaker, we must accelerate investments in low carbon development, in sustainable and green materials, universally designed infrastructure and housing, inclusive transport, Mr. Speaker, e-mobility, and not just focus all of our thoughts and our energies and our conversations on planting trees, because that will not be a holistic way of looking at inclusive climate change justice. Mr. Speaker, we need enhanced accessibility across the board, and this must be embedded in our country if we hope to be adaptable and resilient to the effects of climate change. Mr. Speaker, accessibility is not something we can add on or consider as a half-baked option at the end of our approaches and our programs. We will have been overrun by events by then. Accessibility must be embedded at conception stage, Mr. Speaker. I want to give some examples, some real-life examples that perhaps Kenyans who are listening can relate to. Mr. Speaker, when there is drought, no, let me just backtrack a second, Mr. Speaker. I'll start by saying that there is a sharp departure to the effects of climate change on the non-disabled and the effects of climate change on the disabled and other vulnerable groups, Mr. Speaker. When drought affects you as the non-disabled, it affects us as the disabled much more. When famine affects you, it affects us much more. When poor air quality affects you, it's affecting us and our health far more. When erratic weather patterns affect you, when deteriorating integrity of our buildings and our streets and other infrastructures are affecting you, they're affecting us as persons with disabilities far, far more. Mr. Speaker, do you know that there are reports coming out of different countries in the West that even mobility aids are affected by rising temperatures due to climate change? Hearing aids are being reported by the deaf as not functioning properly or defaulting and needing repair quickly because of climate change and high temperatures. Same for some of the wheelchairs that are being manufactured, Mr. Speaker. Same for some of the white canes like what I use here, Mr. Speaker. Different materials cannot handle the effects of climate change, and that is affecting us as persons with disabilities. And this is not being discussed, unfortunately. And I will echo what Senator Abbas has said again about the council itself. It's unless somebody informs me here today or maybe later, the nominees, I do not, or I have not heard that they are persons with disabilities or identify with any kind of disability. And so how are these types of very imperative, very urgent issues and concerns to do with climate change going to be discussed and put forward and tabled in a progressive manner in this council if persons with disabilities are not at the table? Mr. Speaker, you will have, of course, heard of the very famous saying, which is, if you're not at the table, then you'll be on the menu. And we don't want to be on the menu. We're on so many menus, Mr. Speaker. Okay? We're being left behind in so many other ways. We're struggling far, far more than you can ever imagine, than many non-disabled people in this house can imagine. They see me walking in and out of this house, Mr. Speaker, whether it's on television or wherever they get their news, and they think, oh, that is the face of all persons with disabilities. No, I am one of few who have been able to be blessed with this opportunity. And because of that, Mr. Speaker, I must talk about these kinds of issues that are not being discussed at all. I've not heard of any groups, of any organizations really looking deeply into disability inclusive climate change action or climate change justice. The Paris Agreement have talked about it. A few months ago at COP27, they spoke about it. There were some platforms and forums being headed regarding this topic, but unfortunately it's not mainstreamed at all. And I would like this to be considered moving forward in the Council. What are they going to be doing? What are the strategies? What are the plans that are inclusive of marginalized and disproportionately vulnerable groups in this country in their plans to do with climate change action? I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Girls Secondary School in Kitui County. Honorable Senators, I would like to acknowledge the presence in the public gallery this afternoon a visiting delegation from Kai Girls Secondary School in Mwingi West Constituency, Kitui County. The delegation comprises 4 teachers and 47 students who are in the Senate for a one-day study visit. Honorable Senators, in our usual tradition of receiving and welcoming visitors to Parliament, I extend a warm welcome to them, and on behalf of the Senate and on my own behalf, wish them a fruitful visit. Thank you. Majority Whip, would you be so kind as to welcome the guests?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, it's always a pleasure to see our children come to our workplace, but it's also the seat of power. Mr. Speaker, as I welcome these children, I want to reflect on the care that we give to our children. Today, we are very happy. The children of Kitui are here. But yesterday, we were very sad in Kakamega. And I think on behalf of the children in Kakamega, these children will carry home this pain. That there was a stampede in Kakamega Primary School 2 years ago, and we lost 9 girls and 5 little boys. We went to court to seek for some degree of compensation, and you cannot believe it. After losing 14 children in Kakamega Primary School, the court has sat and decided that they be given a collective 17.5 million shillings. The court's my foot. We care about our children and little children who have come to visit us. We care about you. We will make sure that you have enough teachers. We will make sure that you have enough learning material, and we will make sure that the challenges that you are facing because of the new system of education, we are going to address them. It is not an easy thing. Fixing it is not like instant coffee, because we inherited this awful change from the handshake government, and we are up to it. We'll make sure that we adjust. As far as Kitui is concerned, again, your senator is not here, but we know how expansive Kitui is. And we are doing everything as Senate to make sure that the shareable revenue that goes to Kitui is expanded so as to meet your large population, your large geographical area, and your harsh, almost semi-arid conditions. You're most welcome. I love you, the children of Kitui, the children of this school, and the children of Kenya. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Senator. We're going to resume the debate. Senator Paul Thango.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. As I rise to support this motion, the adoption of the report of the Joint Committee of the National Assembly Department Committee on Environment, Forestry and Mining, and the Senate Standing Committee on Land, Environment and Appointment as members of the National Climate Change Council laid on the table. Mr. Speaker, as I rise to support this motion, allow me also to welcome the students who are here today, who have come to see this house and how we run business. And I would want to distance myself from the comments of the Senator of Kisii, Senator Anyonka, who, while welcoming the other students, said they are lucky that they have come today. Sometimes we act in not a normal way. Mr. Speaker, I wouldn't want to speak on behalf of the Senator himself of Kisii, but I would want to speak on behalf of myself. I am normal, and this side of the majority, we are normal, and we run the business of this house with decorum and normally. Mr. Speaker, as I support this motion, it's good to note that this is the first time this council is being formed for the last 6 years since the Climate Change Act was enacted. Mr. Speaker, this shows that the President, William Samoei Ruto, is serious about matters climate change. Mr. Speaker has been in office. He has been in office for about 8 months now, and you can see he has brought to this house the appointees so that they can start the business of climate change and its effects. Mr. Speaker, the other day, I saw a grandmother of about 100 years planting a tree, and she was planting a blue gum tree. Mr. Speaker, it kept me thinking, this tree takes about 15 years to mature, and a granny of 100 years might not live to enjoy the shade of that tree, but she planted anyway. I would urge this council to have that story as their mantra. Think of the future, not of today. Think about the coming generation. Think about the future of this nation and Africa as a whole. Mr. Speaker, this council, once it is formed, it will attract funding from different countries or different donors, Mr. Speaker. Because I know there are so many countries that are fighting climate change. We do even have the Paris Accord on climate change that is really supporting nations or asking nations to fight climate change and its effects, Mr. Speaker. This council should come up with policies that will for sure mitigate the effects of climate change. Mr. Speaker, when you talk about climate change, the next things we mention or we should mention is trees. And if you remember very well, the President has always had this clarion call that we should plant 5 billion trees within these 5 years that he's in office, and of course another 5 billion when we vote him in again in 2027. But for now, Mr. Speaker, if I was to do quick maths or quick mathematics, 5 billion trees and we have 50 million, people in this country, that means it's 100 trees per person. Mr. Speaker, if you divide that by 5, because that 5 billion trees is 5 years, if you divide 100 trees by 5, Mr. Speaker, you will see that each person only need to plant 2 trees per month, Mr. Speaker. Everybody can be able to take care of 2 trees per month for the next 60 months so that we can achieve the 5 billion mark of trees in this country, as per the clarion call of our president, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I've seen so many people conduct planting tree exercises, and they call hundreds and thousands of people who plant those trees. But I ask myself a question. After you plant all those trees there, who will be watering them? So, Mr. Speaker, we need to redesign how we do things. Don't plant 1,000 trees in a day, then you leave them there, tomorrow they dry. It is an exercise in futility. But if we can take that exercise of planting trees frequently, just minimal, 3, 4 per Kenyan, we will be able to achieve this, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, research is paramount when it comes to fighting climate change. And you know, when you talk about climate change, it's all about food security, and of course, we secure the future of the generation. Mr. Speaker, we cannot talk about climate change without talking about food security. And when I talk about research, it's good for them to research and know why do we have drought in this nation in some areas. They should not only research in this country. Let them go back to even other countries. Even in China, Mr. Speaker. The worst drought was in China in 1964, Mr. Speaker. The worst ever witnessed. And that's why they eat almost everything, Mr. Speaker. Because at that particular time, there was no food. They could eat anything that they could come across. There's even a joke that says, the only thing that has 4 legs that the Chinese do not eat is a table, Mr. Speaker. So I would want them to do research and find out why China has never had drought again since 1964, Mr. Speaker. Is it the variety of food? Do we interest Kenyans to add more to their diet? I'm not saying that you should eat dogs and snakes and everything that is eaten over there, but is it a campaign that we should start? We get away from unga all the time and go maybe to cassava, go maybe to sorghum or any other kind of food, Mr. Speaker. So as I implore the council, once we pass them, because we're going to do, they should come up with policies that will help this nation move forward in terms of fighting climate change. Mr. Speaker, I'm a chairman of the Roads and Transportation and Housing Committee. And we will be bringing some proposals, Mr. Speaker, that those who are given tenders to build our roads, those who are given tenders to build the affordable housing, they should have some segment whereby they will have to plant trees around that areas, Mr. Speaker. Even if you are building a road that is 1 kilometer, you plant trees 1 kilometer this way and 1 kilometer that way, Mr. Speaker. Those are the proposals that we are going to present so that we can mitigate the issues of climate change, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, because of this council, and more so because of the president, this country for the first time is going to host the Africa Climate Summit. That is in September this year. Mr. Speaker, I urge Kenyans, and especially the young people of this nation, take advantage now that we have a council and now that we have a president who understands climate change in and out, that we come up with programs and ideas that are going to assist this nation to be in the global map as one of the nations that fight climate change and brings the mitigations that are required. Mr. Speaker, as I wind up, proposals are given for this council or the nation to listen and understand and pick them from those who give proposals, Mr. Speaker. Once this council is formed, we should think of devolving it or devolving its operations to the county levels, all the way to the ward levels, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we should even think when we are charging land rates. If you have trees, you pay less than that person who is not planting trees. If you have a forest, maybe you should not even pay because you are contributing to the low carbon rate, Mr. Speaker. So I think this is something that now we need to start discussing, invite this council once it is sworn in, and give them all these ideas. And of course, I believe they are equal to the task, and I believe that they're going to do what they're expected to do. With those few remarks, Mr. Speaker, I support.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Esther Anyeni.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I also want to support this motion on the adoption of the report on the Joint Committee on the National Assembly Departmental Committee on Environment, Forestry, and Mining, and the Senate Standing Committee on Land, Environment, and Natural Resources on the approval hearing for the nominees for appointment as members of the National Climate Change Council. To the nominees who made it to this committee, I want to congratulate them. And unfortunately, to the one who didn't make it, I hope they'll consider a member from one of those marginalized communities. Climate change, before I go to the climate change discussion, I would wish to congratulate the Kisii University students who visited us this afternoon. I'm a young person as they are, and I generally think we share similar aspirations. I also want to wish them the very best as they anticipate to join leadership, and that's political leadership. And as young parliamentarians, we'll be looking out to mentor some of these students from the various institutions so that they are able to transit to national politics. So moving on to the climate change discussion, in Kenya currently, the discussion is a welcomed move. And from the composition of this council, it is already a sign of goodwill from the president, and other members will be constituting that council. But I would like to challenge that this discussion trickles down to the bottom level that we largely campaigned on. And when I talk about to the people at the bottom bit of the pyramid, I'm talking about rural women, talking about children, school-going children. I'm also talking about young people. When talking about the females, that's the women, most of these women belong to self-help groups who majorly do table banking. So apart from the table banking, I would like to challenge our Honorable CS, who is also a woman, to ensure that as this goes down to the counties, these women will also be brought on board. Let us have women leaders as champions of this discussion, so that we can also have local women participating, because the effects of climate change affect negatively and positively the women, children, and young people who constitute most of the Kenyan population. Secondly, I see that the council will also be looking a lot on research. We have university institutions, we have technical training institutes. I'm looking forward to this being largely involved. Like for research, we have very many young people who are coming with a lot of innovations, a lot of information in the different areas, who should be tapped by the respective county governments that are going to adopt this. And for the school-going children, I'm looking forward to this being incorporated in our national curriculum so that children grow knowing that it's a responsibility to have a clean, secure environment that is safe for everyone. So that the discussion is not starting when you are way older, it's starting way from school. I think it's India that has that formula of fighting the effect of climate change. Children in school are given seedlings to even go back with them to their homes and plant. So they are planting the seedlings in school, they're also planting the seedlings at home, and the effect is that parents are also able to embrace this. And so once all these people are on board, I'm sure then we will achieve the 15 billion goal of planting trees in Kenya. Finally, this is for the young people. Young people have very huge numbers which are able to influence, mobilize, and keep those at decision-making levels accountable of their actions. I would like to urge young people that we join these conversations so that we are keeping those who will be making some of these decisions on check. And apart from keeping these people on check, we should also be able to embrace the conversation that our president has begun of participating in the planting of trees, so that it's not a discussion in Nairobi, but a discussion in Nyamasaria, a discussion in Kisii, a discussion in every other part of Kenya, and thereby contributing to the general goal of fighting climate change and being in a safe and secure environment. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Tabitha Karanja.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me this opportunity to contribute to this motion. I rise to support this motion and to the approval of the appointees of the National Climate Change Council. I want to congratulate His Excellency, the President, Dr. William Ruto, and the Kenya Kwanza for taking the climate change very seriously. You know, we thought climate change could not happen to the developed world. We only thought it happened to the developed world. But we've experienced it, we've seen it, and I'm happy that now we've appointed a committee that will take care of this climate change. And I don't think they have much time. It is immediately to come up with policies that will meet in the international standard to seriously take care of our environment. I come from Nakuru County, where we have 6 rivers, and the Nakuru County has no water. They have 6 rivers and they have no water. Nakuru County has a freshwater lake, that is Lake Naivasha, and around that Lake Naivasha, we have our flower farmers around there, that Lake Naivasha, and 75% of the flowers that are exported in this country come from Naivasha, Nakuru County. But that Lake Naivasha, as we speak, and we pride as a freshwater lake, our farmers, the flower farmers, they throw the dirty water, the pesticides into this lake. So I think this council has come at the right time when everybody needs it, and the Nakuru County people need it as much as the other part of the country needs it, to ensure that we save our water, our lakes, our rivers. I know when Wangari Maathai got the Nobel Prize and she was fighting for our environment, we all thought she was, I remember some people calling her a mad woman. But if we followed her footsteps, I'm sure by now we could be talking of we could be talking well that we've achieved something, especially on planting the trees that she was advocating for and saving our rivers. Thank you, Senator Onyonka, for reminding me about the Chotola. When Chotola was planting those trees, I think maybe I've just come from school. So we are talking of many years that he did that. So what am I trying to say? Is that if we now take it now and start planting the trees that we all need, I think we'll be talking of in the next 5 years, 10 years, we'll not be talking of the problems that we're having now. And we'll ensure that those policies that will come that meet international standard, we'll ensure that saves our lakes, like the way I'm talking of Lake Naivasha, the freshwater lake, where we are supposed to get the best fish. But now, even as we are talking of the best fish, we are talking of how sure are we of that water. So we should control those for our farmers, given those policies that they follow, to ensure that they follow them, to ensure that they protect our lake Naivasha, the freshwater lake Naivasha. And our rivers are taken care of so that they can be made, they can benefit the people of Nakuru County to ensure that we get water across the county. And I support the motion and support the approval of those appointees so that they start doing their work, then join the other part of the world to fight the climate change. The other part of the world have done it there before, so they don't need to invent the wheel. They just need to take the policies that they've done and implement them here in our country, and I'm sure within a short while we'll start seeing the changes that we've all been waiting for. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Alexander Mundingi.
Asante Bwana Spika, yangu ni kuunga mkono mjadala ya wale wamepata kazi ya mambo ya kupanda miti na mambo ya mazingira. Serikali iko na kibarua kikubwa sana kwa sababu miti tutapanda na itasaidia sisi, hata tutapata mvua, pia tutapata maji itakuwa inakaa, ndio tuwe tukipata maji ya kunywa. Yangu ni kuomba serikali ya Kenya Kwanza kwa yale wamefanya. Tunajua wale watu wamechaguliwa ni watu ambaye wenye elimu ya juu na ni watu ambaye wanajua ile sinda tuko nayo katika Kenya, na wakifanya kazi mzuri kwa hii kipindi ya miaka 5, serikali ya Kenya Kwanza itapata nguvu hata ya kusema ile kazi imefanya. Kwa sababu hapo mbeleni kama serikali zile zingine ingekuwa inafanya kama serikali ya Kenya Kwanza inafanya, kama kufikiria mambo ya binadamu, sisi hatungekuwa vile tuko, kwa sababu kama ile shule imetoka hapa ya Kitui County wiki jana, mimi nilikuwa huko tukienda kuangalia mambo ya ndengu iwe cash crop. Unakuta hiyo eneo ya mjibo hilo kama alitaangaliwa vizuri ama majibu zile zingine kama kwetu Embu, ile miti tutapanda haitaweza kukua vizuri na itakuwa tunafanya kazi ya bure, na tunatumia era ya serikali na hatutakuwa tukipata mavuno mazuri. Kwangu ni kuomba serikali kwa sababu wale watu watatumia pesa nyingi, pia wafanyikazi wao, serikali pia iongee na wizara ya fedha iweze kupatia hiyo wizara pesa nyingi, ndio pia wizara ya maji na wizara zile zingine ambaye kama ya blue economy ndio tu wakipata pesa era nyingi, ndio tuweze kupata mboho, tuweze kuwa na mambawa mengi, ndio jua ni kali, ndio hiyo miti iweze kukua vizuri. Kwa hiyo yangu ni kusupport hiyo mjadala na kuomba serikali iweze kuleta era nyingi, ndio tuweze kupata hata ndamu nyingi ya kusaidia hiyo miti iweze kukaa vizuri. Kwa hiyo mimi naunga hiyo mjadala mkono na sina shinda na hiyo, na tunajua tutafaidika kwa kipindi hii kutoka sasa kuendelea mbele. Asante Bwana Speaker.
Asante sana. Senator Joe Newton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me this opportunity to also say something regarding the appointment of these 3 Kenyans to the National Council on Climate Change, Mr. Speaker. Allow me to first laud our President, His Excellency William Samoei Ruto, for finding it fit to appoint or to make this council so that, Mr. Speaker, we can address this issue of climate change that affects every one of us. Let me also congratulate the nominees on their approval by the National Assembly. And I want to believe that they are going to do the job that they applied for and got. They're going to do it, they're going to give it their best. Because, Mr. Speaker, climate change, as I have said, affects each one of us, each and every one of us. Now, Mr. Speaker, most of those that have spoken before me have talked much about planting of trees, which is very important. But I think, even as I also join them in encouraging the planting of trees, Mr. Speaker, I think I would like to advise our fellow Kenyans that as they grow, as they plant trees, that they may also think of trees that have other benefits, Mr. Speaker, because we cannot just grow trees that can only give us timber. We have trees like macadamia trees, Mr. Speaker, that will help our environment, that will help our climate, Mr. Speaker, and that will also have some other beneficial impact, because we can be able to sell the produce that comes from these trees, Mr. Speaker. Trees like, I don't know what you call them, orange trees. Those trees that have other benefits, Mr. Speaker, I think I would like to encourage our people to grow them so that we can arrest the negative impact or negative climate change and as well benefit from these trees, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, as we think about climate change, there are also some tendencies and practices by some of our people that are making rivers dry. We know that most of our people rely on horticulture done around or near rivers, Mr. Speaker. But I think I would like to urge our people to maybe leave some space for the rivers so that the vegetation cover near a river, Mr. Speaker, may not be removed in the name of planting some other crops, Mr. Speaker, because this is what is leading to drying up of rivers, Mr. Speaker. So these waterbeds, it's very important that we maintain them, Mr. Speaker. Soil erosion is something that the late President Daniel Arap Moi dealt with at length, I think in the 80s, Mr. Speaker. And I think most of the things that were being done then have been forgotten, if not abandoned altogether. I think this is something that should be rejuvenated, that we should think about again. Those days, there was a lot of cutting terraces in the small farms out there, and there were agricultural officers coming to farms and seeing what was being done. That is something that we can go back to, because it would benefit, it would help arrest soil erosion as it used to then, Mr. Speaker. Benches in our farms, cutting them, is also something that we should go back to. And the supervision by these agricultural extension officers should be reintroduced, because I don't know whether they are still there, and the chair agriculture committee is here. I don't know whether these agricultural extension officers still serve, but they are rarely seen, Mr. Speaker. And I think that is something that we should go back to if we are going to prevent soil erosion that has an impact on climate change, Mr. Speaker. Avoiding pollution, as maybe has been mentioned by those that spoke before me, is also something that we should think of at length. That pollution, be it air pollution, be it water pollution, pollution of all kinds, Mr. Speaker. And I'm happy that again His Excellency the President has found it worth forming Nairobi River Commission. Not Nairobi River Commission, the Rivers Commission, Mr. Speaker. And I think we are heading to some very good direction led by His Excellency, Mr. Speaker. And so I think if we arrest pollution, if we plant trees, and mostly those that are beneficial, we arrest soil erosion, and all those other measures, Mr. Speaker, I think, and I believe that those appointees are going to, to get some of these recommendations by this House and the other House, Mr. Speaker, and I believe that we will enjoy a better climate in the coming days, Mr. Speaker. And so, Mr. Speaker, I stand to support the nomination of these particular 3 Kenyans and this particular motion, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for that opportunity. I rest my case.
Honorable Senators, there's a communication from the Chair on visiting teachers from Stone Town Academy in Lamu County. Honorable Senators, I would like to acknowledge the presence in the public gallery this afternoon a visiting delegation of 38 teachers from Stone Town Academy in Lamu County. The delegation is in the Senate for a one-day study visit. Honorable Senators, in our usual tradition of receiving and welcoming visitors to Parliament, I extend a warm welcome to them, and on behalf of the Senate and on my own behalf, wish them a fruitful visit. I thank you. Senator of Lamu.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I wish to take this opportunity to welcome the visiting delegation of teachers from Stone Town Academy. Mr. Speaker, Stone Town Academy is among the best performing private schools in Lamu County. And Mr. Speaker, I can confirm that in the last Kenya Certificate of Primary School Education, Stone Town actually did very well. And that's why, Mr. Speaker, they were given an opportunity by the employee to come and witness what, to come and do the benchmarking here in the Senate, and also visit other parts of the Republic of Kenya, so that actually, Mr. Speaker, they can go back with a well-versed knowledge, so that they can be able to advance the knowledge that they will get from all parts of the Republic of Kenya to the people of Lamu. Mr. Speaker, I want to say that Lamu is a county that education has been left, has been behind for a long time. But now, Mr. Speaker, because I am here as the Senator of Lamu, I want to urge this House, Mr. Speaker, to make sure that we join hands so that we can uplift the standard of education in Lamu County. And that's why, Mr. Speaker, I want to thank the visiting delegation of teachers from Lamu, and I want to encourage other teachers from Lamu County to make some point of trying to emulate what the teachers of Stone Town Academy have done, because I believe it is so, by so doing, we will be able to get some knowledge maybe from other peoples like Senator of Kakamega here, who is also coming from a very advanced county of Kakamega. I believe if this visiting delegation of teachers can be able maybe to make an point of visiting Kakamega, they can also, Mr. Speaker, be able to learn more things from Kakamega and actually take it to Lamu people. Mr. Speaker, I wish to take this opportunity and to welcome them in Lamu County, and welcome here into the Senate, and tell them that no man is limited. Today I'm the Senator of Lamu. They can also decide maybe to change their education career and decide to come to Senate. They are welcome. And if I'm the Senator of Lamu, they can also be something else. Maybe they think that they can be in this Republic of Kenya. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I welcome them.
We resume the debate. Senator Boni Khalwale.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for this chance. And Mr. Speaker, before I commence my contribution, allow me, Mr. Speaker, to also acknowledge the visiting team of teachers from Lamu. Mr. Speaker, this is indeed a very unique council. Unlike any other council, this council is going to be chaired by the president. And the vice chairman of this National Council on Climate Change will be the vice president. And the secretary to the council will be the principal secretary. That is a start team, and I want to support this report. But as I support it, allow me, for purely personal reasons, Mr. Speaker, to register reservation. I've read through, and I don't see why Umra Omar was denied an opportunity to serve on this council. I know Umra Omar. She's one of the rare women, a young woman, who comes from the marginalized community of the remaining Arabic community in Lamu. And Mr. Speaker, this woman is a scholar. She has taught at the university in New York, in the United States of America. And Mr. Speaker, Umra, I know her because I'm a doctor. She has actually launched a Safari link where she brings in doctors from the United States, and they come to Lamu and they attend to the poor. And Umra, if there was no other reason why we would have given her a chance to serve us, Umra should have been allowed because of the respect of the Boni Forest. The Boni Forest contributes on positive climate change. I want to appeal to colleagues, senators, and our younger brothers in National Assembly. When we are vetting, we should always think slightly beyond just the name you know. I can see in this vetting report, Umra was challenged when she was asked about carbon credit. And obviously, knowing Umra who she is, she's very honest. She said it will be part of the learning curve, which is not a big deal. I dare say that even in this parliament, we might have a small percentage of people who are not too clear about what climate change, what carbon trading is. Because this is a new thing. Having registered my reservation, I want to support this and inform the country that, Mr. Speaker, this thing of negative climate change is so dangerous. You will have seen that in this year, Kenya has been slightly hotter. For the first time in Kakamega, where we normally enjoy temperatures of almost between 3 and 8 degrees, for the first time I saw the temperature rise to 34 degrees centigrade. This is the effect of climate change. If you don't address climate change, be prepared to have a hotter world. If you don't address climate change, be prepared for floods and storms. Mr. Speaker, be prepared to lose species of animals. It goes without saying that during the current drought, where we are forced to even feed our wildlife, where we are forced to even take water bowsers to the wildlife, a number of other species have been lost. Mr. Speaker, as a doctor, I can confirm that with climate change, you expose our people more to health risks. And this is why the country should stand behind this council. Mr. Speaker, the issue of afforestation is at the core of what we are talking about. I was pleased that the UNDP came to Kakamega and launched a perimeter fence, electric perimeter fence for 117 kilometers around Kakamega Forest. Kakamega Forest, which being the last remaining tropical forest in Kenya. only to be found in the DRC. Mr. Speaker, I must laud the UNDP, I must laud the government of Japan, which was the lead nation in this afforestation, in these fencing projects in Kakamega. And Mr. Speaker, as I thank them, I want to appeal, as I mentioned in passing yesterday when I was commenting on a statement sought by the Senator of Vihiga, that the Minister for Environment should also encourage and reward communities that live with these forests. We know that in excess of 2,000 youth will be employed as forest reserves. I would be happy if a small percentage of these were reserved for youth from those communities that have preserved forests. On mind, I have the youth who should be given affirmative action to be given those jobs because they know how to live with those forests as it is. They should give youth from Lamu, Boni Forest, Mr. Speaker, youth from Kakamega, Kakamega Forest, youth from Vihiga, Kaimosi Forest, Mr. Speaker, youth from Nandi, the Nandi Forest, youth from Bungoma, the Mount Elgon Forest, and youth from the Mau area, the Mau Forest. Mr. Speaker, speaking about the Mau, I remember when I was serving as the Assistant Minister for President Mwai Kibaki, and I was working in Arusha, there was a day when we got a breakthrough. The country had been under a lot of tension because of the Mau invasion by local communities. And we got a breakthrough, and the president announced that we would plant trees in the Mau. And many people feared to go because they were fearing violence from the youth. I'm proud that I drove from Arusha at 2 a.m. in the morning so as to be in Nairobi and onward to Mau so as to lead the team of courageous Kenyans who refused to fear those youth. And we went and replanted the Mau. Having done this, I reflect on the issue of the conflict between those forests and the people living there. I know there are those people who believe in plantation forests. And there are those people who believe, Mr. Speaker, in the so-called shamba system. I want to discourage them on both. Shamba system is dangerous because you allow people to go and plant food crops in the forest, and at the same time, they take care of seedlings. Usually what will happen, because Kenyans are Kenyans, and when you're poor, you have to devise survival tactics. They'll plant the seedlings and plant food. But during harvest, they destroy those seedlings so that they continue planting food crops in those shambas year in, year out. The issue of plantation forests, we should be against it. I have done my audit and realized the majority of the plantation forests in this country are because of the cypress trees and eucalyptus trees. Cypress trees and eucalyptus trees were never meant for Africa. They were never meant for Kenya, Mr. Speaker. They were imported onto our continent, and if you come from anywhere where you have seen a plantation forest of cypress, walk in there. It is such a harsh species of plant that the cypress does not allow anything, any other plant to grow underneath. So when it is done, when you bring it down, you find it has left the entire area bare. On the other hand, eucalyptus is so harsh that it takes all the water, and when you plant it, the other plants find it difficult to throw long enough roots to get that water. The third disadvantage of this plantation forest, Mr. Speaker, is that when you allow harvesting, because it's a plantation forest, then the people who harvest, they take advantage to now stray into the natural species. Let me give you the example of Kakamega. In Kakamega forest, there was misadventure of allowing a small section of our forest to have cypress trees, which are usually up for harvest on a regular basis. When these people come to harvest, because they have now been allowed to enter into Kakamega forest with their power source, they then stray into the natural forest and they bring down the age-old mutukuyu, which in English is called the elk teak. And it is a tree that grows for hundreds of years before it reaches the kind of heights we have. I want to invite colleagues, members of parliament, for a nature trail in Kakamega forest. It's the kind of beauty you have never seen. I know not many of you have seen one single tree which is over 100 meters. Meaning, if you cut it, the cut side will be on one end of a football pitch, and the end of the treetop will be on the other end of the football pitch. It's beautiful. In fact, one of the memorable photos I have in my phone is one such a tree, which my father planted for me 25 years ago when I was setting up my home. He planted it. And today, that tree in my home, and colleagues, you're welcome for a plate of ugali and mrenda in my home. The tree now sits at 55 meters, towers in my home. I challenge you, if you have such a tree in your home, I surrender my salary for this month to you. It's beautiful. And this is what nature is. Mr. Speaker, having said that, I have walked the length and breadth of this Republic of Kenya. And without belittling any community, I want to tell you the story of my community. My community, I don't know who taught them. They believe in forests. An ordinary home is not a home unless there are trees in the homestead. But if you go to many parts of this country, homesteads are just bare. There are no trees there. In fact, any little remnants of trees that were there are brought down so that the home, I don't know, to be made clearer or what have you. I've gone to this kind of homes. We must teach our people more about agroforestry, since we have a shortage of land and since we want to improve on our forest cover. Part of the reason why we have 9 months of rain per year in Kakamega, it is because of agroforestry. I know Samburu, you're thinking it's not. It's doable, it's doable. So the trees then, they create a circle whereby they cause the rain to come and the rain will always be there, so drought is a foreign thing. You can imagine, in a year, we have 9 months of rain, at the very minimum. Mr. Speaker, I want to end my contribution by remembering my former colleague in this House, Professor Wangari Maathai. Professor Wangari Maathai was a great woman. In fact, when she ran for president in 1997, my brother and colleague and friend, Michael Kijana Wamalwa, was also running for president. If it hadn't been for that contradiction, that a personal friend, a mentor, was running for president, I would have voted for Wangari Maathai. Wangari Maathai single-handedly fought Moi because Moi was busy hiving off sections of forest land. Mr. Speaker, I don't know whether you know, if you go to the Mau, I see some of Moi's children speak, and I say, you can't address me. Because you go to in the heart of the Mau, and Mau is beautiful. You find the father just hived off hundreds of acres and planted tea. If your point of order is about challenging me on that one, I can clearly, I can substantiate many times.
Honorable Speaker, the senator for Kakamega knows very well why I'm raising on a point of order. Is it in order for Senator of Kakamega to discuss the late president who cannot be summoned to this house to defend himself, Mr. Speaker?
Senator from Kakamega, Dr. Boni Halwale, you're out of order. Just conclude on your submission on it.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. If you were to allow me, I could vary the contribution so that it sits pretty with my younger brother and Senator for Washinigishu. But because we want to keep track, you've had me. I don't know whether it is the DNA in him or whether it is the correctness or wrongness of what I've said that is guiding him. Mr. Speaker, I was bringing that example because in the fullness of time, if we really believe in this republic, we will have one day in this country have to discuss about historical injustices, which include, Mr. Speaker, unjustified wealth. Unjustified wealth, Mr. Speaker. And I'm not going to mention any name. May all those people in this country who use their high office in this country to unjustifiably enrich themselves and their families know that one day that conversation will take place. There is no way, Okio Mtata, you can justify how one family can have land ownership which is equivalent to the entire Nyanza and Western province put together. Not just that, but prime land. Mr. Speaker, this is the unjustifiable wealth that we are talking about, and we have nothing against anybody. I believe in ownership of property, in fact, a lot of property, so long as, Mr. Speaker, you sweat for it. I have been following your history long before you came here, Mr. Speaker, and I see how hard you have worked your legal practice. The little money you have that brought you here, Mr. Speaker, I know you made it, you sweated it, you spoke English in the court of magistrates, you spoke in the High Court, in the Court of Appeal. You have even addressed the Supreme Court, up to and including on presidential petitions. That is the prototype of a leader that we want to teach our children. A prototype of a leader like the bullfighter who brought himself to this parliament using the proceeds of my medical practice. Mr. Speaker, we want our children to know that there is distance in politics so that they don't think for you to fund your things, you have to plunder public resources. With those many remarks, Mr. Speaker, I thank you and apologize to the family of Moi if they fell by mentioning the land they had. I've made a mistake. I was making it as an observation on a mega injustice to the water tower of the Mau.
Thank you very much, Honorable Senator Boni Halwale. From the desk here, yours truly has represented a number of the Mau issues in court. The Honorable Okoiti Andrew Omtata from Busia, Senator.
Mr. Speaker, sir, thank you for this opportunity. I would personally, I'll be very brief, and I'll be looking at matters of enforcement of the law concerning matters climate and the environment. We have very many beautiful laws in this country, but hardly are they enforced. For example, if you look at the law governing riparian lands and rivers, you are not allowed to plow up to between a minimum of 6 to 30 meters from the center of a river. That law, when you were growing up, used to be enforced by agricultural extension officers, whom we hardly see anymore. And you'll find that today, people are plowing right onto the water of the river. People are buying pieces of land and settling right onto the river. If you come to wetlands, the law on wetlands is just sitting on paper. There's no enforcement. Our wetlands have been drained. And you know, Mr. Speaker, sir, wetlands were designed by God to work like a sponge, whereby when there's a lot of rain, they suck in the water, and then they release the water quietly and slowly into the river or into the lake. But the wetlands have been destroyed by farming habits which are not scientifically sound. This has resulted into massive erosion, massive floods, and when during the dry season, you hardly have water in the rivers. The rivers just become a trickle. So the rivers have just become like a drainage system and not natural features which God placed on this planet to manage and control environmental issues. Mr. Speaker, sir, I would really urge that the organizations concerned for enforcement of these laws, we have got WARMA, we have got NEMA, and the like, if they took up their mandate and said across this country we are going to enforce these laws, and the land that is liberated we are going to reforest it or afforest it with the kind of species that are conducive to wetlands and river banks, we will increase the tree cover in this country. So one of the main problems with the environment for me is the failure by the institutions, the likes of NEMA and others, to enforce the law. Mr. Speaker, sir, I would also urge that we think of roadsides, the road reserves. We have very huge lands that are under road reserves. If the state decided to plant forests so that all our roads, our highways, become avenues, you can imagine driving from Mombasa on an avenue where that is ringed by forests on both sides. It would really be an enabling or an ennobling experience. The nebulous in this country would show. But where we are today, our roads are not considered worth being given some type of furniture or some type of tree cover that can add to the beauty, to the scenery, and also increase the tree cover in this country. Mr. Speaker, sir, we have got hills in this country, and some are owned by individuals. Hills which at times cannot make viable agricultural enterprise. And they have been invaded, and some of them have been stripped of their tree cover. Mr. Speaker, sir, it would be prudent for the government to come up with a plan to map our hills and also to do compulsory acquisition where people have got private ownership, property rights over it, and then do a plan to populate them with trees so that we can increase the tree cover in this country. Mr. Speaker, sir, I don't need to belabor the point. It has been stated that the meltdown in the environment is not sustainable. The solution is in tree cover and other practices. So let us look at that. And when we come to the question of wetlands, Mr. Speaker, sir, I would like to raise the issue of Yala Swamp. Mr. Speaker, sir, Yala Swamp straddles two counties, Busia and Siaya. It's about 16,000 hectares or thereabouts. 11,000 of them are in Busia. It's about 17. 11,000 are in Busia, and only 6,000 are in Siaya. But when you look at the way that swamp has been dealt with, contracts are signed in Siaya with investors, and they come across and are messing up that swamp. Instead of engaging in a kind of farming activities that do not interfere with the swamp, they have done a lot of damage to that swamp, and it's high time that the government took action and intervened, and also helped us get a proper boundary between Busia and Siaya, so that if Siaya want to mess that side of the swamp, so be it, but let them not mess up the Busia side of the swamp. So the people in Bunyala have been disadvantaged by the decisions that are made in Siaya over Yala Swamp. Also, the swamp has also been, a big part of it is now underwater because the rivers that flow into Lake Victoria have silted over. And the silting is because of the improper agricultural activities upstream, where swamps have been drained and then people are plowing up the river. And then you find at the end of the day there's a lot of erosion, so the rivers have silted over. And when it rains, the water does not flow into the lake. So the water spreads on the land, and you get what has now become the famous Bunyala floods. The government needs to intervene because the county government does not have the wherewithal to do anything about it. It requires the national government to intervene and give us a scientific solution. If it is drenching the waterways, to open the waterways, it will help. And also the clogged waterways, because there are no roads that go to the islands and stuff, they use those rivers to access islands. You find people in those areas can hardly access their islands. And their lives are really, really difficult. So if the waterways would be opened, we would have a lot of land liberated, a lot of livelihoods restored, and the quality of life of the people in Bunyala would be highly improved. The solution does not just lie in putting up dikes and stuff. The solution lies in taking a sober look at the challenges on the ground. So I've just given that as an example of what we face when the climate goes the wrong way. But Mr. Speaker, sir, it's not too late. It's doable. It's available. And I've also found that the Department of Forestry, the Kenya Forestry Service, is only too willing to partner with those who would like to help it get on the ground. I visited their offices recently. I was warmly received, and there's going to be a tour of Busia County by the Kenya Forestry Service to try and map out the forest cover in Busia and see what kind of interventions are required. And this is dire because whereas the national average is a paltry 10% forest cover, in Busia, the figures I'm seeing are very, very disheartening. We are supposed to be having a 0.4% forest cover, not even anywhere near the very small national average that we are required to have. So, Mr. Speaker, sir, I really pray that the committee, the council we are considering and whose names we intend to approve to come in and help us fix the environment, a council that contains the president, the vice president, and many senior people and experts will be able to stand up to the task and go to war against the environment change. And like any war, you don't leave it only to the soldiers. Any war demands input from the citizenry and the population. Let us mobilize our people to appreciate these things so that when NEMA comes and says, please don't, or Warma comes and says, you are plowing up to the river, the waters in the river, can you move back 6 meters? There will be no resistance on the ground. They will understand that it's for their own good that that is required. So, Mr. Speaker, sir, with those few remarks, I support the motion that is on the floor, which is the report of the joint committees of these houses on nominees for appointment as members of the National Climate Change Council. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir.
Honorable Senator Mandago Jackson was in issue.
Mr. Speaker, I rise in support of this motion for the appointment of council members for the climate change. And Mr. Speaker, from the onset, let me say that climate change mitigation is no longer a matter that is going to be left to be discussed by non-governmental organizations, the Ministry of Environment, or specifically institutions that deal with matters climate change. This is a matter that must be canvassed in all state departments because it affects not only the future of our generations to come, but it actually affects the lifespan of the human beings. And if push comes to shove in the environment realm, the first living organs to leave this earth will be the human beings. And therefore, it is imperative that these matters of climate change are properly mainstreamed in government. Mr. Speaker, when we talk of climate change mitigation, the issues of gas emission, the issues of industrial pollution, Mr. Speaker, it is my hope and belief that this Council will take this matter very seriously, and particularly taking on the developed industrialized countries on their stake and portion of pollution. Mr. Speaker, as you are aware, most industries have been developed in the third world countries to manufacture goods and products for the West. Asia and Africa is now being blamed. We are carrying 70–80% of the blame on the pollution of the environment because we became two continents, one providing material and the other one providing an industrial hub for the West. Mr. Speaker, I hope African countries will wake up during COP meetings and demand a consumerate action and funding from the countries who have industrialized and polluted the earth more than the rest of the countries. Mr. Speaker, as we mainstream the climate change policy, both in national and county governments, Mr. Speaker, the aspect of enforcement has been lacking, and government has been reluctant for a very long time to implement laws that are in place. Mr. Speaker, it is saddening to see wetlands being destroyed, government is watching, rivers are drying, sources of water are becoming scarce, and yet there are laws that enable us to deal with this problem. Mr. Speaker, we need men and women of courage, like the late Michuki, who in a short span of less than 3 years was almost able to restore the riverbanks, the wetlands, by making sure there are no eucalyptus being planted along the rivers and in the wetlands. But what happened after Michuki left the docket? We went back to again the same problem, planting eucalyptus in wetlands, planting eucalyptus along riverbanks. Mr. Speaker, I urge the Minister of Environment to be decisive in the actions of conservation, If they are not decisive, we are going to face challenges. And we would like the national government agencies to work closely with county governments. Mr. Speaker, in my county, we have a forest called Kaptagat, which is shared between Uasin Gishu County and Elgeyo Marakwet County. Mr. Speaker, we pursued the Ministry of Environment, the Kenya Forest Service, to change and declare Kaptagat as a water tower, because Kaptagat Forest is extremely important for the growth of Eldoret Town, which is soon to become a city. Eldoret Town will not become a city without sufficient water for both domestic and industrial use. We cannot get that water if Kaptagat Forest is not conserved. And we have asked that let it be declared a water tower so that we can continuously begin planting indigenous trees, bamboo, so that we can conserve the wetlands, the sources of the rivers, and avail water. Besides water, Mr. Speaker, that forest also acts as a training ground for athletes, Mr. Speaker. And you know, with the forest being a purifier of oxygen, it gives a very conducive environment for training. We want to urge the national government to work with county governments closely in ensuring that we reforestate the forests within our counties, sharing in the burden of providing resources for that afforestation. Mr. Speaker, the role of this council also includes education, approve a national gender and intergenerational responsive public education awareness strategy and implementation program. Mr. Speaker, they say you cannot teach an old dog new tricks. If we want to become efficient in management of our environment, Mr. Speaker, we must integrate this into our education system. And Mr. Speaker, we have student organizations that can help both national and county government advance the agenda of climate change. And Mr. Speaker, I have in mind the Kenya Scouts movement, the Kenya Girl Guides movement. Mr. Speaker, if we integrate in our schools and involve the Scouts, provide funds for the Scouts and Girl Guides movement to drive this agenda, Mr. Speaker, all the children, school-going children in this country will be aware and will begin from the onset and the early stages of their life, understanding the need to conserve our environment. Mr. Speaker, I would urge the national government and county governments to include Scouts movement and the Girl Guides movement in schools so that they can help us with matters of environmental management. Mr. Speaker, the biggest also threat to our rivers is urbanization and the management of solid waste. Mr. Speaker, a number of towns in this country lack proper sewerage system. And you find all the raw sewer being discharged into our rivers. Mr. Speaker, if we don't mitigate on this matter by ensuring that all major urban areas and towns, cities in this country are provided with proper sewer lines, our rivers are going to be continuously polluted. And I propose, Mr. Speaker, that even in towns and cities where we have rivers that run across, there is need for change of policy under the urban planning to ensure that all rivers become the frontage of the homes or the commercial centers, so that there is no waste being dropped in the rivers when it becomes a frontage. There is always a tendency in most of the towns in Kenya to make the rivers the back end of the compounds, and therefore it's more easy to dispose your waste through the back end of your compound because the rivers have been made the back end. I propose that even in Nairobi, with Nairobi River, if we want a sustainable way of ensuring that Nairobi River remains clean after being cleaned, because we are not going to encourage the cycle of cleaning Nairobi River 5 years, then it is left again for the next 5 years, and we have waste and garbage being dumped in the river, and then we go back to cleaning Nairobi River again after 5 years. For sustainability, Mr. Speaker, I want to propose to the county government of Nairobi to convert all properties that touch Nairobi River to make the river the frontage of those properties. And that way, we shall minimize the waste that is being put into the rivers. That will save government and generations the funds that are being used after every short period of time in creating institutions that are going to clean Nairobi River, institutions that are going to maintain Nairobi River, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, finally, as I conclude, counties are to mainstream the issues of climate change in the CIDPs. Even as counties do that, Mr. Speaker, it is imperative that through the coordination of the National Climate Council, that funds are also availed to counties to support this function. Mr. Speaker, you will be surprised that for the last 5 years, counties were being given 11 million under FLOGA funds for climate change. What is 11 million for a county like Turkana that is 66,000 square kilometers? It is a nasal area. It needs a serious intervention to make sure we change the climate situation there. We want to ask the National Treasury, development partners, to make sure that at least 60% of the activities of climate change should be domiciled in counties, because that is where the action is. And I want to acknowledge what the Senator of Nandi said about my county, Mutembei sub-county. That is actually the sub-county that is letting us down in terms of forest cover. But I want to assure this House that we have a robust plan, as was in Gishu County, to make sure that we increase our forest cover to more than 15% within the next 5 years. We also want Kenya Forest Service and the Ministry of Environment to enforce the 10% forest cover requirement, whether public or private land. That way, even farmers endowed with more resources should convert part of their